The very first thing I did after becoming a zombie was search everywhere for milk and diapers. Just because I adopted a human baby girl, every zombie around me would have probably laughed and called me insane. But what none of them knew was that this little baby was actually the reincarnation of an empress from another life. In her previous life, she had fought wars across countless lands and survived endless battles between life and death. She had defeated many powerful enemies, yet during a crucial trial, she was ambushed and ultimately died at the hands of the queen of the space insects. Now she had been reborn and sent back 50 years into the past, right to the beginning of the apocalypse. The only problem was that she had returned as a baby. As for me, I had only just been transported into this world when I was immediately attacked by zombies. In the end, I became one of them. Fortunately, I still retained my human mind. For an entire month, I survived on frozen meat I found inside the refrigerator of a convenience store. But now the meat was beginning to rot. Even though zombies normally ate rotten flesh, I simply couldn't force myself to do it because my human consciousness was still intact. I had no choice. I needed to pretend to be an ordinary zombie and go outside to search for food. When I entered a house and was about to head toward the kitchen, I suddenly heard the crying of a baby coming from another room. I forced the door open and was greeted by a bright and tidy bedroom. It felt completely different from the bloody scene in the living room. On the bed, I saw a baby girl around 6 or 7 months old crying loudly. I guessed that before her parents died, they had reinforced the bedroom door to protect their daughter. Meanwhile, Ruzu had completely fallen into despair after enduring so much hardship just to be reborn. She never expected that instead of seeing her parents first, the first thing she would see was a zombie. On top of being hungry for so long, she was now overwhelmed by fear. The mixture of hunger and terror finally caused Ruzu to faint. Looking at the tiny child, I was stunned. Even though she was only around 5 or 6 months old, her eyes carried an indescribable sadness and hopelessness. Somehow, in this world, I felt like I could understand exactly what she was going through. Both of us had been thrown here helplessly and forced to face the end of the world. We were both unfortunate. We were both pitiful, and this new life that had suddenly appeared before me felt like a light shining through endless darkness. She gave me a new purpose, and because of that, I decided to adopt her. Then I noticed that she looked like she was starving. The milk cans in the room had already been emptied, so I decided to go outside and search for more. I carefully locked the room where she was staying and pushed a sofa against the door to block any zombies from getting in. After searching the kitchen and finding nothing, I had no choice but to go upstairs. The hallway on the 3rd floor was covered with dried black blood. Pieces of severed limbs were scattered across the floor. Even with the building doors open, the stench was still nauseating. Some zombies lay in the hallway with their bodies torn apart. By now, I had become numb to such sights. I simply continued searching the apartments. I entered kitchen after kitchen, but I couldn't find any milk. All I managed to gather was a little raw meat that had not completely rotted yet. Eventually, I searched a unit on the 5th floor. The lady of the house had already turned into a zombie. What was even more tragic was that she had eaten her own child. I stood there in silence. If Shajia hadn't been safely locked inside her room, she probably would have suffered the same fate. Thankfully, inside that kitchen, I found 2 unopened cans of powdered milk and more than 1 kilogram of fresh raw meat that had not yet spoiled. While Ruzu drifted in and out of consciousness, she suddenly felt the taste of milk entering her mouth. Instinctively, she began sucking it down. When she finally regained enough strength to open her eyes, she was shocked to discover that she was still alive. Even more shocking was the sight before her, a zombie carefully feeding her milk with a spoon like a nanny. In her memories from her previous life, zombies were bloodthirsty monsters. She herself had killed many people who had transformed into zombies. Is this zombie planning to fatten me up before eating me? She wondered. I had no idea what was going through her mind. All I knew was that when I saw her open her eyes again, I felt genuinely relieved. But because she had gone so long without eating, even after I fed her an entire bowl of milk, it still wasn't enough. I momentarily forgot that I was a zombie now. I tried to speak, but only a low growl escaped my mouth. So I stayed silent and quietly turned away. I prepared 3 more bowls of milk before she was finally full. I let out a deep sigh. Taking care of a child really wasn't easy. I realized I would need to stockpile much more milk in the future. Thankfully, canned milk lasted a long time, so I didn't have to worry about it spoiling. After Ruzu had eaten and drunk her fill, she lay contentedly in her crib. Everything felt incredibly confusing to her. The zombie standing before her was clearly a newly transformed level 1 zombie. Creatures like that should have been incapable of independent thought. She simply couldn't understand what was happening. However, as an empress who had survived countless brushes with death, Ruzu gradually calmed herself despite the fear still lingering in her heart. She thought to herself, even if this zombie decides to eat me now, at least I'll die with a full stomach. Because of that, she stopped worrying so much. The exhaustion from days of hunger and fear finally overwhelmed her, and before long, Ruzu fell into a deep sleep. As I watched the peaceful face of the sleeping child, I couldn't stop myself from smiling. It was the first time since becoming a zombie that I had felt true peace and happiness. But if I left a baby this young alone, she would surely die. Because of that, I decided to take her with me. The building we were staying in was an old 7-story apartment complex. The second floor, where we currently were, wasn't safe. The 7th floor was much safer because it connected directly to the rooftop. Since the building was old, there weren't many zombies inside, but the ones that remained were undoubtedly starving. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to feast on us. Carrying a crowbar, I quietly smashed their heads from behind and cleared a path. After making sure the baby was sleeping comfortably, I took a bath and changed into clean clothes. Now, aside from my horrifying wounds, I looked almost like a normal person. Most importantly, inside one of the rooms, I found a complete set of baby supplies. The family had probably abandoned them in a hurry when the outbreak began. Because I had been moving around so much recently, the stiff arms and legs I developed after becoming a zombie seemed to be improving. I could now perform simple human movements. Although I didn't understand why, I didn't dwell on it. Instead, I focused entirely on Ruzu. When I picked up a diaper to change her, a shocking thought suddenly appeared in Ruzu's mind. Earlier, she had only been confused by the fact that I was feeding her. But now, after watching me change her diaper, she became convinced that I might still possess a human mind. Thinking back to our first meeting, she realized I was different from other zombies. I knew how to turn a doorknob, use a crowbar to open doors, prepare milk, and feed a baby. None of those actions were things a simple level 1 zombie should be capable of doing. Her suspicion grew stronger and stronger. She believed that only a human mind could suppress a zombie's bloodthirsty instincts. Then, in the next second, Ruzu's eyes widened in shock. No matter how she looked at me, the zombie standing before her definitely didn't seem to be female. She never imagined that her spotless reputation would suffer because of something as simple as a diaper change. However, she quickly accepted it. After all, being reborn was already a miracle, and she owed her life to this zombie. There was no point making a big issue out of something so small. When Ruzu saw my stiff body struggling to change her diaper despite the difficulty, she felt both sympathy and immense gratitude. She began to think that perhaps I once had a happy family too. But because of the apocalypse, I had become a zombie. The pain and sorrow of losing everything was something anyone would find unbearable. That thought softened her heart completely. At that moment, she decided to accept me as her zombie papa. Meanwhile, I continued organizing our new home while worrying about how I would feed both of us. I decided to start stockpiling as much food as possible. But if I went out during the day, the survivors might become suspicious and discover us easily. Because of that, I chose to move only at night. Before leaving, I didn't just close the room door, I barricaded the entrance and the staircase as well, making sure that neither zombies nor humans could get inside. I had already seen far too many people willing to do absolutely anything just to survive. In this apocalypse, the darkest parts of human nature were exposed every single day, so I remained extremely cautious. Before leaving, I tightly secured the iron gate on the ground floor and then began searching for supplies. Although there wasn't much left inside the nearby houses, once everything was gathered together, it would still be enough food for the two of us. After filling my hiking backpack to the brim, I walked through the darkness carrying a huge amount of milk. But suddenly, I felt something strange. When I looked up, I realized that the moon hanging in the sky had turned an eerie crimson red. At the same time, Ruzu woke up and noticed that I was no longer inside the room. After comfortably relieving herself into her diaper, she casually looked out the window and immediately spotted the blood-red moon outside. Her eyes widened as she thought, the era of global evolution is about to begin. I was surprised when I saw the blood moon, but after already finding myself in a zombie apocalypse and having seen similar scenes in countless sci-fi movies, I accepted it much faster than I expected. In my mind, this was exactly how the end of the world was supposed to look. Because of that, I simply continued carrying supplies. I didn't even leave the books behind. However, during my fourth trip back and forth, I suddenly sensed that something was wrong with my body. My cold, lifeless flesh abruptly became burning hot. The sensation felt strangely familiar, yet completely different at the same time, almost as if I had become a living human again. But then my brain started itching intensely. It felt like my entire head was about to explode. Panic instantly filled my heart. I couldn't help thinking, am I about to lose my humanity? Am I finally going to become a true bloodthirsty zombie? I was terrified. But it wasn't just me. Every zombie standing beneath the moonlight was experiencing the same thing. The survivors exposed to the blood moon were also changing. Their bodies grew hotter, their blood circulated faster, and their bones became stronger. Meanwhile, Ruzu, who remained inside the room, was also enveloped by the moon's crimson light. Her tiny body trembled slightly as warmth spread throughout her entire being. I had no idea how much time passed, but eventually I regained consciousness. Although nothing around me seemed particularly different, I could immediately feel that my movements had become much faster. My body was no longer as stiff as it had been when I first turned into a zombie. Then I noticed something even more shocking. The black veins covering my body had disappeared and my hair had started growing back. Even the zombies wandering through the streets had changed. Their disgusting appearances had become slightly more human. A small spark of joy appeared in my heart. It seemed this world wasn't as simple as I had originally believed. As I crossed paths with another zombie, I suddenly felt something unusual. It genuinely felt as if some invisible thread was connecting us. I froze in shock. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but then a possibility appeared in my mind. It felt like I had awakened a special ability. Through that invisible thread, I could transmit my thoughts directly into the zombie's mind, almost as if I were controlling a puppet. When I focused harder, the connection became stronger, and I found myself capable of making zombies perform increasingly complicated movements according to my commands. I named this ability Zombie Control. However, after testing it repeatedly, I discovered that I could only control 2 zombies at the same time. If they moved too far away, my control weakened and they stopped following orders properly. I guessed it was because of the limits of my mental power. Because of that, I began calling the zombies under my control my zombie puppets. After feeling a little mentally exhausted, I suddenly remembered that Ruzu was alone back at the apartment. I immediately ordered my 2 puppets to carry the supplies we had collected, and together we hurried back home. Honestly, zombies were the perfect servants. They didn't need food, water, sleep, or even salaries. Meanwhile, after the night of blood had passed, Ruzu finally woke from her deep sleep. The moment she opened her eyes, an enormous amount of information flooded her mind. Excitement instantly filled her gaze. The powers she had awakened this time were different from those in her previous life. Now she had awakened telekinesis, allowing her to move objects using only her thoughts. But what shocked her even more was that she had also regained her former ability to control time, the same power that had made her an Empress in her previous life. Both abilities possessed terrifying potential and could one day make her the strongest being in existence. Back then, she had risen to become an Empress using only her time control ability. Now she possessed 2 overwhelming powers. One excelled in offense and defense, while the other could manipulate the very flow of reality itself. But when she tried to use her abilities, her current body was still nothing more than that of a baby. After only a few moments, a splitting headache struck her. An overwhelming weakness spread throughout her body. Even though her mental power was still extremely low, she couldn't suppress her excitement for the future. She firmly believed that as she grew older, her strength would far surpass what she had achieved in her previous life. She even found herself imagining what kind of terrifying existence she would become once she fully matured. The moment Ruzu thought about her future, she made a firm decision. One day, she would personally defeat the queen of the insects who had killed her in her previous life. Just then, loud noises came from outside. Ruzu immediately guessed that her zombie father had probably returned home. She couldn't help but wonder, if a zombie could retain a human mind, would that zombie also gain special powers after the night of blood? On the other hand, when I saw that the wardrobe blocking the hallway hadn't been moved at all, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Ever since arriving in this world, this was the first time I had worried so much about someone else. I quickly pushed the wardrobe aside and hurried into the room. There, I saw Ruzu awake, quietly staring at me. I had never even had a girlfriend before, yet at that moment, I genuinely felt what it meant to be a father. I went into the kitchen, and since there was no electricity or running water, I used bottled mineral water to prepare milk for the little girl. While I mixed the milk, Ruzu carefully observed her new zombie father. She noticed that something about me had changed, although it wasn't very obvious. At least now I looked a little more human. This was completely different from the zombie evolution she remembered from her previous life. Back then, there had been many different types of zombies. For example, there were tank zombies, massive creatures with terrifying muscles and incredible durability. Their bodies were like moving war tanks, making them the nightmare of every survivor. Because of that, Ruzu had originally assumed that since I was a special zombie, I would become extremely powerful after the Night of Blood. After all, strength was the key to survival during the apocalypse. But when she realized that I hadn't changed much, she couldn't help feeling slightly disappointed. Because of that, she secretly made a promise to herself. When she grew up, she would become strong enough to protect me personally. She knew very well that without me, her fragile infant body would have died long ago in this apocalypse. And she was the type of person who never forgot a favor, especially a debt as enormous as this one. In her heart, she silently said, "You took care of me when I was helpless. When you're old, I'll take care of you." That promise can never be empty words. More importantly, she understood how zombies truly evolved. The most common method was by devouring living flesh. Besides that, they could absorb the crystal cores found inside the brains of other evolved zombies. Any zombie that awakened special powers would eventually form a crystal core inside its brain. Ruzu was confident that with the advantage of her knowledge from her previous life, she could collect crystal cores and help me evolve into a high-level zombie. When that day came, I would be able to speak again, and my body would gradually return to being human. Of course, I had absolutely no idea what the little girl was thinking. I only saw her staring at me with bright eyes full of curiosity, which made me genuinely happy. Even though I couldn't speak, I still gestured enthusiastically. I wanted to tell her that I had found 2 zombie bodyguards for her. I had also prepared toys, and, on top of that, brought her books such as 5-year mock exams and 3-year college review materials. Then a sudden realization hit me. I still hadn't given Ruzu a proper nickname. After thinking for a while, I decided that since we were living on the 7th floor, I would call her Kiki. Hopefully, that name would always remind us of the happy days we spent together in our little home on the 7th floor. I was extremely pleased with all the supplies I had gathered during the previous night. I knew they would be enough to feed both Kiki and me for a very long time. Since there was no way of knowing what could happen in this apocalypse, I decided that for now, I would remain inside and observe the outside world until I was certain it was safe. I walked into the living room and picked up a massive machete nearly half a meter long. I had no idea what kind of work the former owner of this apartment had done to own such a terrifying weapon. Even though I had never received any formal sword training, my zombie strength allowed me to swing it with ease. I imagined the sword techniques I had seen in martial arts novels and movies and began practicing inside the living room. Now that I had a weapon, I felt confident that I could fight multiple opponents at once. While I practiced my movements, Ruzu rested briefly before continuing to study her newly awakened abilities. Using her telekinesis, she focused on a silver needle resting on the nightstand. Although her control was still weak and slow, the needle gradually floated into the air and drifted through the room. In this way, 2 days passed surprisingly quickly. Both of us had been incredibly productive. After feeding Ruzu her milk, I suddenly heard a loud crashing sound outside. I immediately looked out from the balcony window and noticed something strange happening on the street below. 2 zombies were fighting each other. They weren't fighting over food. They were genuinely trying to kill one another. This bizarre behavior completely contradicted everything I knew about zombies. Since the 7th floor was too high for me to see clearly, I decided to go down to the 4th floor for a better look. One of the zombies was nearly 2 meters tall. Its body was packed with dense muscles and tremendous strength. The other zombie was much thinner, but its claws were as sharp as blades. The giant tank zombie possessed incredible defense, while the thin zombie excelled in speed and attack power. However, no matter how fiercely it attacked, it couldn't break through the tank zombie's defenses. After an intense battle, the tank zombie finally unleashed its overwhelming strength and sent its opponent flying. Then, with one final punch, it shattered the other zombie's skull and killed it instantly. What happened next shocked me even more. The tank zombie reached into the corpse's brain and pulled out a white crystal core. I was completely stunned by the power both zombies displayed. Their abilities were far beyond anything I could currently match. Thankfully, I had been cautious and avoided venturing outside recklessly. This world was clearly much more dangerous than I had expected. I absolutely couldn't become complacent just because I had evolved. Then, the moment I saw the tank zombie pull out the crystal core, an intense craving surged through my body. Every instinct I possessed screamed that the crystal core would be incredibly beneficial to me. Did that mean the entire fight between those 2 zombies had simply been a battle to steal each other's crystal core? I watched as the giant zombie swallowed the white crystal core whole. Immediately afterward, it excitedly pounded its chest and released a deafening roar. Then it began smashing nearby vehicles apart with terrifying force. The ordinary zombies around it froze the moment they heard the noise and slowly backed away. They were instinctively afraid of that creature. I had a strong feeling that crystal cores greatly increased a zombie's strength and accelerated their evolution. In fact, their desire for crystal cores seemed even stronger than their hunger for human flesh and blood. If I could obtain and consume a crystal core, my zombie control ability would definitely become stronger. Unfortunately, it was obvious that I wasn't capable of defeating that monster right now. Then my eyes landed on the gas tank in the kitchen. Instantly, a dangerous but brilliant plan formed in my mind. At the same time, Ruzu also heard the commotion outside. Even though she couldn't see what was happening below, her experience from her previous life allowed her to understand the situation immediately. After the appearance of the blood moon, the entire world had officially entered the era of great evolution. Zombies and monsters were now hunting each other to become stronger. Human survivors had also begun collecting crystal cores, and sooner or later, they would discover methods of cultivation that would allow them to grow stronger as well. As the strongest empress of humanity in her previous life, the technique Ruzu had mastered was none other than the highest-level crystal breeding technique. She knew very well that her zombie father, who was currently nothing more than a weak and ordinary zombie, would have an incredibly difficult time surviving in this apocalyptic world. She needed to become stronger as quickly as possible so that the 2 of us could protect each other. Even though she was only a baby right now, she could still use the crystal breeding technique. She immediately began absorbing the residual energy left behind in the air by the blood moon. The moment she activated the technique, her tiny body started trembling as streams of energy slowly flowed into her. Yunruzu couldn't help feeling grateful for her second chance at life. The apocalypse had only just begun, yet she already had access to the crystal breeding technique, allowing her to strengthen herself far earlier than before. Massive amounts of energy surged through her body, strengthening her bones and increasing her weak mental power. When I came upstairs from below and saw her trembling, I immediately misunderstood the situation. I thought she was cold and about to get sick. Without hesitation, I rushed over, grabbed a blanket, and carefully wrapped her up. Yunruzu was startled awake. When she saw the worried look on my face, she almost laughed. At that moment, she felt a warmth she had never experienced before. The warmth of a father's love coming from her zombie dad. In her previous life, she had grown up in an orphanage. She had experienced all the cruelty, indifference, and coldness the world had to offer. This was the very first time she had ever felt the love of a father. After confirming that baby Kiki was perfectly fine, I began thinking about how to deal with the giant zombie outside. That monster was a huge threat, and I needed to eliminate it before it became even stronger. That night, I sent out my first zombie puppet, which I controlled through my mind, to provoke the giant tank zombie that was resting inside a store while absorbing the power of its crystal core. My puppet picked up a flower pot and hurled it at the tank zombie before immediately turning and running away. Just as I expected, the enraged monster chased after it straight toward the store where I had secretly placed several gas tanks. The first puppet rushed inside. A moment later, the tank zombie charged in as well. Because of its enormous body, it barreled forward without slowing down. The collision instantly crushed my puppet like paper. Then my second zombie puppet entered the scene. It slammed the door shut and ignited the gasoline using a lighter. Since the tank zombie was standing directly in front of the explosion, its horrifying roar echoed throughout the area as flames engulfed its entire body. When it finally managed to escape from the burning store, it staggered only a short distance before collapsing near the entrance. The moment the gasoline exploded, I immediately severed my connection with the puppets. From afar, I watched as the giant zombie was reduced to a charred corpse lying at the doorway. Even then, I waited more than 10 minutes just to make absolutely sure it was dead. Only after confirming it was completely lifeless did I finally approach. As I got closer, I saw that its face had been burned beyond recognition, and its body was mangled beyond repair. Gripping my machete tightly, I swung with all my strength and split open the back of its skull. Inside, I found a crystal core that was white with faint traces of red. The temptation this crystal created inside me was far stronger than the pure white crystal core I had seen before. Based on my observations, pure white crystal cores came from ordinary zombie evolution through devouring other zombies. This reddish crystal was clearly of a much higher grade. Since the flames had already begun attracting nearby zombies, I quickly stored the crystal away. Then I selected 2 zombies whose arms and legs were still intact and turned them into new zombie puppets. After returning to the apartment complex, I left my new puppets downstairs to stand guard before heading up to the 3rd floor. Once I confirmed everything was safe, I could no longer resist my overwhelming desire for the crystal. I swallowed it immediately. As its power flowed through my body, my skin gradually became more human. Not only did my appearance improve, but my physical strength and speed increased as well. After a brief period of dizziness, my mind became incredibly clear. My 5 senses grew much sharper, and controlling zombies became significantly easier. I could now control 5 zombies simultaneously. Even better, I gained a new ability that allowed me to see through their eyes. Previously, I had needed my puppets to remain within my line of sight to control them effectively. Now that restriction had disappeared. I could command them even from great distances. Based on my testing, my mental range had expanded to nearly 1 kilometer. Within that radius, I no longer needed to leave the apartment personally. I could simply send my puppets to act on my behalf. Protecting myself and Kiki had suddenly become much easier. Meanwhile, Yunruzu heard the explosion from the stores and the terrifying roars of evolved zombies outside. Since she was safely hidden on the 7th floor, she wasn't too worried about being discovered. However, I still hadn't returned home. That made her extremely anxious. She knew better than anyone that in her current state as a baby, she had absolutely no chance of surviving against evolved zombies that had become far stronger than before. She understood exactly how dangerous such creatures were. All she could do was silently pray that she wouldn't lose the zombie father who had given her the love of a real parent. Even though she wanted to continue practicing the crystal breeding technique, she simply couldn't focus because of her worry. Then, right at that moment, she heard the sound of a door opening from outside. Yunruzu immediately relaxed and smiled. After all, the only one capable of unlocking the door was her zombie father. When I returned home and saw Yunruzu's sweet smile, my heart instantly warmed. Knowing that I had become stronger and could now protect her more effectively made me happier than ever. I cheerfully headed into the kitchen to prepare her milk. As I watched her happily drinking it, I felt as if my decaying body had somehow come back to life. During the next 2 days after becoming stronger, I constantly used my zombie puppets to search the surrounding area for supplies. I also turned several rooms downstairs into storage warehouses. Besides gathering food and necessities for the baby, I discovered plenty of weapons that could be used against zombies. Even though my daily routine had become repetitive, I still felt incredibly happy. Every day, I could clearly feel myself growing stronger. As for Ruzu, aside from drinking milk every day, she spent nearly all her time practicing the crystal breeding technique. Occasionally, she would hear strange noises coming from the living room. Based on everything that had happened recently, she had already guessed that I had encountered evolved zombies with special abilities. She understood very well how powerful those creatures were. Their strength and aura were on an entirely different level compared to ordinary zombies. In this new world, common zombies occupied the very bottom of the food chain. They were constantly threatened by survivors, by stronger zombies, and by countless dangerous monsters. The more Ruzu thought about everything, the more touched she became. Even though I was struggling to survive in such a dangerous world, I had never abandoned her. She also knew how cruel humans could become during the apocalypse. Because of that, she treasured her zombie father even more. After all, a zombie capable of preserving both his sanity and humanity was something incredibly rare, perhaps even a miracle in itself. After countless rounds of training, Ruzu's telekinesis became incredibly powerful. She could now control silver needles and fire them at astonishing speeds. Combined with her ability to manipulate time, she was confident that she could silently eliminate enemies without making a sound. But she wasn't satisfied with that. In a world filled with terror and death, simply being strong wasn't enough. She needed to become even stronger if she wanted to survive. Meanwhile, while I was commanding my zombie puppets to search neighboring buildings for supplies, I stumbled upon an apartment that seemed to belong to a martial arts enthusiast. The previous owner had left behind numerous combat manuals detailing all kinds of close-quarters fighting techniques. Ever since evolving as a zombie, my physical abilities had already surpassed those of a normal human. My body was no longer stiff, which meant I could learn and practice complex combat movements much faster than before. Although zombies usually relied on crude attacks like biting and clawing, the combat methods developed by humans were far more efficient and calculated. Even though my evolution was no longer focused solely on physical combat, I still believed that proper martial arts could make up for weaknesses in raw strength. Besides, unlike humans, I didn't need to fear being bitten by other zombies, which gave me a huge advantage when using weapons. After studying several techniques and practicing them extensively, I gathered a few zombies into the living room on the 6th floor and released them from my control. They immediately became my sparring partners. Let me tell you something. When a zombie learns how to fight properly, stopping it becomes a nightmare. But after experiencing real combat training, I realized that reading theories and inventing my own moves wasn't enough. When an actual fight begins, only real combat experience matters. The most important thing is learning how to judge distance accurately and predict an opponent's reactions in an instant. Through constant training, my fighting skills improved dramatically. Ordinary zombies were no longer a threat. Dodging their attacks had become effortless for me. I had gone from being a complete martial arts novice to a capable fighter with solid techniques and fluid movements. I also discovered something unexpected. I could multitask far better than before. While training in combat, I was simultaneously controlling zombie puppets to search for supplies and using their vision to monitor the surrounding area. Then, while observing through one of my puppets, I noticed something strange in the Sunshine community. On the 3rd floor of the first building, 2 zombies were scavenging for supplies when a blood-red shadow suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Its speed was so terrifying that if it weren't for the faint traces it left behind on the floor, I would have thought I was hallucinating. I immediately ordered one of my zombies to follow the crimson shadow. A few minutes later, I finally got a clear look at the creature. The sight sent chills down my spine. It was horrifying beyond words. Not only was its skin peeling away, but its teeth and tongue had mutated into grotesque forms. Its hands and feet had transformed into sharp claws resembling those of a savage beast, making it impossible for it to stand upright like a human. It could only crawl. But that weakness was deceptive. In exchange, it possessed unimaginable speed and monstrous strength. It crawled across the ground at incredible speeds and could run along walls and ceilings like a giant spider. The moment my controlled zombies faced this crawling zombie, overwhelming fear flooded through them. Before they could even react, the monster moved. In the blink of an eye, it slaughtered both of my zombie puppets. What kind of monster was this? The moment my vision returned to my real body, I realized I was trembling. Ever since the blood moon appeared, the abilities awakened by evolved zombies had far exceeded my expectations. My current strength wasn't even remotely enough to fight something like that. Even if all 5 of my zombie puppets attacked together, they would probably be killed instantly. At that moment, my only hope was that the red zombie would never come to Building 5, where Kiki and I were hiding. Because I couldn't afford to waste any time, I trained relentlessly every single day, fighting zombies over and over to become stronger. 1 week later, inside the 6th floor living room, I found myself surrounded by 3 giant zombies at once. Yet I was able to move quickly through the confined space, searching for openings and using my unique fighting style to bring them down one after another. While sharpening my combat skills, I continued sending my zombie subordinates out to gather supplies and carefully study the behavior and movements of evolved zombies. I knew this was only the beginning. The apocalypse was becoming more dangerous with every passing day, and I had a feeling that what was coming next would be far worse than anything I had faced so far. Monsters like that blood zombie were incredibly difficult to fight, so I knew I couldn't recklessly challenge one until I became much stronger. Compared to that terrifying creature, the giant tank zombies and fast zombies I had encountered before were actually much easier to deal with. During my scouting over the past few days, I had noticed something important. Crystal cores were usually found only inside the brains of evolved zombies. Meanwhile, up on the 7th floor, Ruzu, who was still just a baby, had gone from exhausting herself trying to move a tiny silver needle to being able to lift her own body 1 or 2 centimeters off the ground. For most people, flying through the air was nothing more than a dream. Even though she still couldn't truly fly yet, her relentless training had finally given her enough power to protect herself, at least a little, in this horrifying apocalyptic world. What she didn't know was that if the major survivor camps ever discovered her existence, they would go crazy trying to take her away. A baby capable of levitating herself was simply too rare and valuable. After another intense training session on the 6th floor, I ordered my zombie subordinates to clean up the scattered remains of the enemies we had defeated. I was just about to head upstairs to feed Kiki when one of the zombies I had sent out to gather supplies discovered something interesting. Not far away, a thin but incredibly fast zombie was chasing a starving survivor who looked little more than skin and bones. The poor man had apparently run out of food and had been forced to leave his hiding place in search of supplies. Unfortunately, he happened to cross paths with the evolved zombie I had been looking for. The creature was unbelievably fast. It even used its razor-sharp claws to dig into the side of a car and make a perfect turn while sprinting. In the next moment, it caught up to the survivor and brutally killed him. The instant I witnessed that scene through my zombie puppet's eyes, I realized this was my chance. Ever since swallowing my first crystal core and experiencing that overwhelming surge of energy, my desire to become stronger had only grown. Without hesitation, I ordered one of my zombie puppets to secretly track and monitor the fast zombie. I left one puppet behind as a scout and then summoned 4 more zombie subordinates, each carrying a fire axe to join the hunt. Once all 5 zombies had gathered, I disguised them as ordinary wandering zombies. Keeping a safe distance, I slowly surrounded the fast zombie while it happily feasted on human flesh. I chose this strategy because I knew exactly how fast my target was. If I attacked recklessly, all of my zombie puppets would probably be wiped out. When we were only 10 meters away, I suddenly ordered all 5 zombie puppets to attack at once. Although the fast zombie dodged many of the incoming strikes thanks to its speed, it still suffered wounds on its right arm and back from the axes because of the encirclement. Unfortunately, one of my puppets got its axe stuck between the creature's ribs. Enraged, the fast zombie instantly slashed off that puppet's head. I immediately ordered 2 more zombies to attack from the front to distract it, while the remaining 2 took advantage of the opening and launched attacks from the sides. Even though the fast zombie managed to knock back the puppets in front of it, it couldn't avoid a devastating axe strike that cut deeply into its waist. A huge chunk of flesh was torn away. Wounded and furious, the zombie exploded with even greater speed and smashed another one of my puppets to pieces. But by then, my remaining 3 zombies were already charging in. In the end, the fast zombie could no longer evade the relentless barrage of axe strikes. Eventually, it collapsed and died. After successfully killing my target, I ordered my surviving zombie puppets to dig into its skull and retrieve the crystal core. Once they secured it, we hurried back to our community. Upon arriving, I stationed my zombie puppets at the building entrance to stand guard while I personally brought the crystal core up to the 6th floor. When I examined it carefully, I realized it looked exactly like the crystal core I had consumed before. It was a white crystal core with faint traces of red mixed into it. Apparently, that fast zombie had also consumed crystal cores in the past. Without hesitation, I swallowed it. Once again, a flood of overwhelming energy surged through every part of my body. When the process finally ended, my abilities had improved dramatically. I could now control 10 zombies at the same time. My control range had expanded to nearly 3,000 meters. Excited by my newfound strength, I selected 10 large-bodied zombies from the surrounding area and equipped each of them with fire axes. Just like that, I created a fierce zombie assault squad. Looking at my growing force, I couldn't help but admire myself. For a moment, I even dreamed of building a massive zombie army someday. With my powerful zombie control ability and countless zombie soldiers under my command, I could conquer any place I wanted. I even began considering strategies that relied on overwhelming numbers. But despite all of that, I still couldn't forget the terrifying red monster lurking inside Building 1. After fighting the fast zombie, I finally understood just how terrifying that creature truly was. Compared to it, the fast zombie seemed insignificant. Even though I now controlled 10 zombie puppets, I still knew far too little about that monster to guarantee victory. Because of that, I decided to wait a few more days before sending zombies to test its true strength. The creature felt like a ticking time bomb hanging over my head. As long as it existed, I couldn't relax for even a moment. Over the next 3 days, I completely transformed the sixth floor into my personal training room, preparing myself for the battle that I knew would eventually come. As I continued fighting zombies day after day, I realized that my body had become even stronger after evolving. I nodded with a satisfied smile. This body of mine now looked exactly how a survivor of the apocalypse should look. After finishing my training, I ordered my zombie puppets to clean up the remains left behind from the battle. Once I washed the blood off my body, I headed back to the 7th floor to feed baby Kiki. The moment I saw her innocent smile, I couldn't stop myself from smiling too. This little girl's appetite seemed to be getting better and better every day. After feeding her milk, I grabbed some of the toys I had collected and tried my best to make her laugh. Meanwhile, Ruzu simply stared at her zombie father, acting like a complete fool while trying to entertain her. Internally, she could only facepalm. On the outside, she looked like an innocent baby, but in reality, she was a fearless, calm, and peerless Empress. Still, since her zombie father's intentions were good, she had no choice but to force a smile. Unfortunately for her, the moment I saw that smile, I became even more motivated to make her laugh. Ruzu almost suffered a mental breakdown. In the end, she could only comfort herself by thinking, "Forget it, I'll just treat this as another form of telekinesis training." After playing with Ruzu for a while, I finally decided it was time to test the strength of the red monster hiding inside Building 1. From the horde of ordinary zombies, I selected 10 large and powerful ones and armed them with fire axes. They already looked intimidating, but I still felt something was missing. Then I remembered an e-bike shop on the corner that sold helmets. I immediately led my zombie puppets there and smashed open the store entrance. For each zombie, I equipped a full-face motorcycle helmet. After all, the head was a zombie's greatest weakness. Even if their bodies were torn apart, as long as their heads remained intact, they could still swing an axe and keep fighting. Once everything was ready, I controlled the entire squad remotely and sent them charging toward Building 1. Since my zombie control range had already reached 3,000 meters and I knew I was at a disadvantage in close combat, I chose to remain hidden inside Building 5 and command them from a safe distance. The zombie squad began searching from the first floor. They carefully inspected every room and every corner, especially the ceilings, since the red monster could crawl on walls like a spider. Before long, they had already searched 4 entire floors without finding a single trace of the creature. What they didn't know was that the red monster was already clinging to a dark corner on the 5th floor like a spider, silently waiting for my zombie puppets to climb higher. Then, suddenly, it attacked. In an instant, the zombie puppet closest to the door was sent flying. Thankfully, it was wearing a helmet, so its head wasn't destroyed. I immediately ordered the entire squad to counterattack. Axes rained down toward the monster. If Ruzu had been there, she would have recognized the creature immediately. It was a licker, a mutated zombie born after the apocalypse. According to the memories from her previous life, creatures like this had slaughtered countless survivors during the early days of the end of the world. The licker was furious. Its movements were unbelievably fast. It swatted several of my puppets aside as if they weighed nothing, but under my control, even when damaged, my zombies desperately grabbed onto its claws and limbs. At the same time, the remaining puppets continuously brought their axes crashing down toward its head. The licker became trapped inside our encirclement. Even when it leaped away, several axe strikes still landed on its body. I repeatedly focused all attacks on the same area. Finally, under my command, 3 puppets worked together and managed to sever one of the licker's arms. Letting out a painful screech, the creature leaped onto the ceiling. I immediately ordered the puppets to throw their weapons at it, but the monster was simply too fast. On top of that, the strength and accuracy of my low-level puppets had already dropped significantly. The licker smashed through a window and escaped onto the outer wall of the building. In the blink of an eye, it vanished. I cursed silently. I had underestimated it. Even after all my preparations, the bastard still escaped. That thing moved far too quickly. It could run along the outside walls of buildings as casually as someone walking on flat ground. Now that it had escaped, it would definitely become much more cautious and might even seek revenge. Thankfully, I had equipped my puppets with helmets, which reduced the damage considerably. But my greatest concern wasn't my losses, it was that red monster. What if it suddenly sneaked into Building 5? What if it discovered my baby? If it climbed up the exterior wall and reached the 7th floor, we would have no chance of escaping. I quickly forced myself to calm down and began creating defensive plans. I stationed 3 of my strongest and best armed puppets to patrol Building 5 around the clock. That way, even if the monster entered silently, I would know immediately. At the same time, I ordered my remaining puppets to search for other mutated zombies. Back when I consumed those 2 crystal cores and became stronger, I had been incredibly excited. But because of this red monster, I finally realized the truth. In this world, I was still nothing more than a small fish in a very large ocean. Meanwhile, inside the room on the 7th floor, Ruzu was using her telekinesis to control 2 dolls and make them float through the air. Of course, as a great empress from her previous life, she wasn't actually interested in toys like these. But she didn't want my efforts to go to waste, and she had also discovered that controlling dolls was excellent practice for her telekinesis. So she continued playing with them. A short while later, she sensed my presence approaching. She immediately hugged the dolls. When I entered the room and saw her happily playing, all of my exhaustion instantly disappeared. Looking at her, I couldn't help but think, my baby. This world has become so dark and broken. I just hope that when you grow up, you won't be disappointed by life. I hope you stay exactly as you are now, without worries, without burdens, simply growing up happily. I hope the two of us can continue surviving together in this zombie apocalypse. As those thoughts crossed my mind, I suddenly glanced toward the window and my expression turned serious. Without wasting any time, I went out to gather wooden boards and nails so I could completely seal the window. Meanwhile, Ruzu sat there staring at her zombie father with a confused expression, wondering what he was planning this time. For several days, I barely went outside, and now I was even sealing the windows completely. Watching me work, Ruzu couldn't help but think, don't tell me my zombie dad got scared of those powerful mutated zombies and decided to hide here forever to avoid trouble. The more she thought about it, the more reasonable that explanation seemed. In her mind, her zombie father was apparently a huge coward. What she didn't know was that she had overlooked one very important thing. I was doing all of this to protect her. Besides, after the blood moon, many humans had evolved as well. At the beginning of the apocalypse, people would panic and run whenever they encountered ordinary zombies. But now, even regular survivors could easily kill low-level zombies. While Ruzu was lost in those thoughts, I continued hammering nails into the boards. After a while, I finally finished reinforcing the window. However, I intentionally left small openings to allow sunlight and fresh air inside. That way, Ruzu would remain safe without feeling like she was trapped inside a prison. More importantly, the barricade would buy me precious time to react if those blood-red monsters ever attacked. 3 more days passed. Even though the crimson monsters never appeared, I still kept my zombie puppets patrolling Building 5. I refused to lower my guard. Then one day, I suddenly received information through my mental connection. One of my zombie puppets had encountered a group of survivors while searching a store for supplies 2 blocks away. At first, the survivors thought it was just another ordinary zombie. But when the puppet turned toward them, one of the survivors, a muscular man named Taizo, charged forward carrying an iron pipe. I immediately controlled the puppet and ordered it to fight back with its axe. The moment their weapons collided, I was stunned. The zombie puppets I selected were all large and physically powerful. Zombies were naturally stronger than ordinary humans to begin with. Yet I never expected this man to be so strong. The force behind his iron pipe strike was so overwhelming that it numbed my puppet's arm. Taizo's strength was astonishing. He knocked the axe away and crushed my puppet's head with a single blow. Walking over to the fallen zombie, Taizo frowned in confusion and muttered, "This world is getting crazier and crazier. Zombies can use weapons now. Maybe this is some new type of evolved zombie." Still, he didn't think too deeply about it. He immediately called his companions over and told them to gather supplies quickly. He was worried that the commotion might attract evolved zombies. When the others saw him kill the zombie with a single strike, they immediately began praising him while collecting supplies. One of them said, "Good thing Brother Taizo is here. Otherwise, we would never have gotten this much food." Another laughed and said, "That's right. What are evolved zombies supposed to do against Brother Taizo? With his incredible strength, one hit is all he needs." Naturally, everyone wanted a powerful ally in the apocalypse, so they shamelessly flattered him. After hearing all the praise, Taizo looked extremely pleased with himself. Meanwhile, I was surprised. A full month had already passed since the apocalypse began, yet I was still seeing living humans. More importantly, judging from Taizo's strength, I was almost certain he was an evolved human. There was simply no way an ordinary person could possess such power. Humans had intelligence and complicated ways of thinking. Because of that, I couldn't help worrying. If survivors ever discovered the enormous amount of supplies Kiki and I had stored away, they might become a threat to us. After considering the risks, I decided not to send any more puppets into that area. Following that encounter, several more days passed quickly. For now, I stopped collecting supplies entirely. My zombie puppets had been so efficient that every room in Building 5 was now packed with food, tools, and various resources. During the same period, Ruzu continued practicing her telekinesis on top of her bed. She used it to help herself crawl and gradually gain control over her body. Day by day, she moved faster and faster. Finally, with the assistance of her telekinesis, she learned how to walk. It just so happened that I opened the door and entered the room at that exact moment. The scene I witnessed left me completely speechless. My little angel was only a few months old. How was she already walking upright? At first, I was utterly shocked. Then that shock was instantly replaced by overwhelming joy. Ever since the beginning, I had wanted her to adapt to this cruel world as quickly as possible, but I never imagined she would learn to walk this early. Without hesitation, I picked Ruzu up and carried her into the living room. I figured practicing on a flat floor would be much easier than training on a bed. Ruzu adapted quickly with the help of her abilities, but her physical body was still extremely weak. Keeping her balance consumed a huge amount of energy. After a while, she stopped moving. I assumed she was simply tired, so I gently placed her on the sofa to rest. Once she was comfortable, I picked up my sharp machete and walked toward the balcony to continue training. Ever since my body evolved and absorbed so much energy, every swing of my blade cut through the air with a powerful whistling sound. The truth was that my training methods weren't sophisticated at all. Everything I practiced came from martial arts movies and shows I had watched when I was still alive. I was simply copying the basic movements and sword swings I remembered, but deep down, I felt that as long as I continued becoming stronger, every swing would eventually become powerful enough to protect the people I cared about most. I felt that as long as I kept getting stronger, even a simple stone in my hand would be enough to shatter anyone's defenses. Meanwhile, Ruzu was completely stunned as she watched me train. Until now, she had always thought I was just an ordinary zombie who happened to retain a human mind and could use weapons, giving me an advantage over normal zombies. But as the former Empress of humanity, she possessed vast combat experience from her previous life. In her eyes, my movements were absolutely terrible. My technique was full of flaws, and my fighting style looked like complete garbage. She was convinced that if I ever faced a truly powerful opponent, her zombie father would be sent flying with a single slap. Of course, I noticed her staring at me, but I misunderstood the situation entirely. I thought she was admiring how amazing I looked while practicing. My confidence immediately shot through the roof, and I started swinging my blade with even more enthusiasm. Over the following days, I simply let little Kiki play in the 6th floor living room. Since I trained there every day, the 6th floor was much more spacious and comfortable than the 7th floor room, whose windows I had completely sealed with wooden boards. While I practiced combat techniques on the balcony, Ruzu secretly practiced walking properly inside the living room while also sharpening her telekinetic abilities. As I watched over her day after day, her tiny steps became increasingly steady. She really was a genius. But despite her rapid growth, the anxiety in her heart continued to grow. Ever since the appearance of the blood moon, zombies and mutated beasts had been evolving at an alarming rate. Ordinary zombies like me would eventually lose their place in this cruel world. She knew she had to become stronger as quickly as possible, even if it was only to avoid becoming a burden. As both of us focused on improving ourselves, an angry roar suddenly echoed from outside. A bad feeling instantly rose in my chest. Without hesitation, I shifted my vision into one of my zombie puppets. In the grassy area of the subdivision, I saw 2 evolved zombies fighting to the death. One was a massive tank zombie standing nearly 2.5 meters tall. Every swing of its fists created shockwaves, and each punch left deep craters in the ground. Its opponent was the same licker I had encountered before. Crawling on all fours, it moved with terrifying speed, and its claws were as sharp as sickles. The battle between the 2 powerful evolved zombies was completely even. My eyes lit up with excitement. This was the perfect opportunity. 2 evolved zombies had appeared at the same time, and they were exhausting each other in battle. All I had to do was wait for both sides to weaken and then reap the rewards. I immediately rushed out the door and headed downstairs while gathering my zombie puppets. Hearing the noise outside, Ruzu became extremely worried. She had no idea that I could control zombie puppets remotely. In her mind, I was heading out to fight evolved zombies face to face. But because she was still too weak to move freely, all she could do was secretly pray inside the room. As I descended the building, I summoned all of my puppets. 10 armed zombies silently crept toward the battlefield. After a long and brutal fight, both evolved zombies were covered in blood and serious injuries. In the end, the blood-red liquor tore off one of the tank zombie's arms and finally brought it down. The giant zombie collapsed and died. The crimson monster itself was barely alive after the battle and was just about to retrieve the crystal core when my puppet squad suddenly surrounded it. The monster let out a furious roar and desperately tried to drive them away, but my puppets felt no fear. Under my control, they charged forward relentlessly and swung their axes without mercy. Because the battle was taking place in an open area, the liquor lost the advantage it normally enjoyed from leaping between walls and ceilings. In a single moment of hesitation, it found itself trapped in the center of my formation. Before it could escape, I secured the crystal cores of both evolved zombies. I was ecstatic. I immediately ordered my puppets to retreat back to the subdivision. The 2 crystal cores were almost completely red by now, a clear sign that both zombies had already consumed many of their own kind. When I returned to the 3rd floor, I couldn't suppress my excitement any longer. I swallowed both crystal cores at the same time. The energy they contained was far beyond anything I had experienced before. But the most important change wasn't in my body, it was in my mind. A terrifying power suddenly flooded into my consciousness. The force was so overwhelming that it exceeded everything I could handle. Before long, I completely lost consciousness and collapsed. Meanwhile, up on the 7th floor, Ruzu paced back and forth on the sofa, consumed by worry. Too much time had passed without any sign of me. Little by little, she began losing hope. She truly believed that I had died at the hands of those evolved zombies. In her heart, she mourned her poor zombie father. While tears filled her eyes, she silently complained, Why didn't you at least wait for me a little longer? Just as despair began taking over, the sound of the door lock suddenly echoed through the room. Ruzu instantly raised her head. The moment she heard it, a sweet smile bloomed across her face. The moment Ruzu saw me return, she jumped off the sofa and ran toward me as fast as her tiny legs could carry her. Then she opened her mouth and called out, "Papa!" It felt like a bolt of lightning struck me. I froze on the spot. My baby Kiki had just called me Papa. I had lived through 2 lifetimes and I had never even had a girlfriend before. Yet somehow, out of nowhere, I had become a father. The feeling was indescribable. I was so happy that I didn't even know what to do with myself. At the same time, Ruzu was stunned too. Because of her excitement and relief, she had accidentally let the word slip out before she could stop herself. But she quickly calmed down. After all, she still possessed the soul and memories of her previous life, so her ability to speak had never disappeared. The only reason she hadn't talked before was because she had never bothered practicing after being reborn. As for me, I didn't care about any of that. The only thing on my mind was how unbelievably smart baby Kiki was. Nobody had taught her anything, yet she could already speak. I let out 2 low growls to express my overwhelming joy. Unfortunately, I still couldn't talk. After my latest evolution, the number of zombie puppets I could control had increased to 30, and the range of my mental power had expanded to a shocking 8 kilometers. With this newfound strength, I immediately started planning how to expand my army even further. Meanwhile, after Ruzu finished eating, she no longer wanted to drink milk. She opened her mouth wide and deliberately showed me her 2 rows of baby teeth as if saying, "I don't want milk anymore." I felt a little embarrassed. Imagine being outsmarted by a baby. So I hurried down to the 6th floor and cooked some porridge. I mixed it with milk and mashed it into soft baby food. The moment I handed her a spoon, she grabbed it herself and started eating independently. She even looked at me as if complaining, "Papa, you're way too slow. I'll do it myself." Watching her happily eat on her own filled me with joy. I couldn't help sighing as I thought to myself that my little Kiki was truly growing up. After my powers increased, a bold idea suddenly appeared in my mind. Could I control evolved zombies too? Before long, an opportunity arrived. One of my zombie puppets, several kilometers away, discovered a lone tank-type evolved zombie. Together with my puppet, we disguised ourselves as ordinary zombies and slowly approached it. When we were about 100 meters away, I unleashed my telekinetic mental power. The evolved zombies' mental defenses were far stronger than those of ordinary zombies. I immediately felt powerful resistance. However, my evolved telekinetic abilities were even stronger. In a matter of moments, I shattered its defenses and successfully turned it into my puppet. I named him Dapang. His body was enormous, packed with dense muscles from head to toe. His arms were as thick as steel pillars. I went to a hardware store and found 2 massive hammers weighing more than 50 kilograms each. I handed them to him. Every time he swung them, the air itself seemed to scream. Whenever Dapang stood guard at the entrance of our subdivision, he looked like a god of war protecting the gate. With Dapang guarding our home, I felt safer than ever before. Not long after that, I managed to capture an agility-type evolved zombie as well. I named him Kidlat. He moved with unbelievable speed and excelled at close-range combat. He perfectly compensated for Dapang's lack of mobility. One specialized in attack and defense, while the other specialized in speed and assassination. Combined with my 20-plus ordinary zombie puppets, I finally felt like I had the power to survive anywhere in this apocalypse. Then, while searching for supplies, Dapang encountered a gigantic mutant dog. The beast was nearly 2 meters long, with black fur as hard as steel. Its body was as large and muscular as a wild boar. This was the first time since the apocalypse began that I had encountered a mutated creature other than zombies. Without hesitation, I took control of Dapang and ordered him to attack. With a single swing of his hammer, he shattered one of the mutant dog's front legs. The next strike crushed its skull completely. After killing it, I retrieved a white crystal core from inside its brain. Just as I suspected, mutated beasts also possessed crystal cores. I ordered Dapang to bring the dog's corpse back to our subdivision. Once it arrived, I cut off a portion of the meat and ate it to satisfy my hunger. The taste was strange, but as I chewed, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. If mutant beasts also contained crystal cores and powerful flesh, then the apocalypse was far more dangerous and far more full of opportunities than I had ever imagined. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly beginning to carve out my own place in this terrifying new world. I left the remaining mutant dog meat for Dapang, and to my surprise, the fresh flesh rapidly healed the wounds covering his body right before my eyes. After eating the mutant dog and consuming the crystal core from another tank-type zombie we encountered, my mental power increased even further. Of course, Ruzu knew nothing about any of this. The moment I left the building, she secretly slipped downstairs to investigate on her own. What she found left her completely stunned. From the 3rd floor all the way to the 6th floor, every room was packed with supplies. Mountains of powdered milk, stacks of mineral water reaching almost to the ceiling, and countless baby products and food filled the building. She couldn't help but think, my god, just how much stuff has Zombie Papa stockpiled? More importantly, her suspicions became even stronger. In her mind, there was no way an ordinary zombie could gather this many supplies. She guessed that I must possess some kind of tunneling ability. She imagined that I could travel underground, allowing me to transport supplies quickly and secretly. When she climbed down to the first-floor balcony, she saw Dapang standing guard at the entrance with two giant hammers in his hands. That only reinforced her theory. She became convinced that I used an underground digging ability to move in and out of the area. The truth, of course, was that Dapang was nothing more than a puppet under my control, but Ruzu didn't know that. Secretly, she made a decision. Once she became strong enough, she would kill that giant zombie herself and remove what she believed was an obstacle in my path. While exploring, she also found the property contract for the building. After learning that we were in Shanghai City, memories from her previous life immediately surfaced. There were two famous powerhouses in Shanghai. One was a female police officer known as the Nine-Death Demon Cop, a woman capable of reviving 9 times after death. The other was a mutated white bear called Thunderlord, a terrifying beast that controlled the power of lightning. Ruzu couldn't help thinking, if I can recruit the Nine-Death Demon Cop before she becomes too powerful, she'll be an enormous help in the future. Not long afterward, a military helicopter flew over the city and scattered flyers across the sky. The flyers announced that the Shanghai military had established a survivor base outside the city. After reading one, I casually tossed it aside. I was a zombie. Why would I care about a human survivor base? Meanwhile, Ruzu merely sneered and crumpled up the flyer. In her previous life, she had lived inside a survivor base before. All she remembered was darkness, exploitation, and injustice. Compared to living among people who constantly preyed on one another, she would rather stay beside her zombie father. As I continued expanding my forces, a policewoman named Su Making from a nearby station arrived at Sunshine Community with several officers. She planned to find a truck and use it to evacuate survivors out of the city. However, the moment they reached the entrance of the subdivision, they encountered Dapang. Su Making picked up a stone and threw it at him to get his attention. When Dapang didn't react, she drew her pistol and opened fire. The instant I saw her aiming at my puppet, my temper exploded. I didn't care what her intentions were. If she damaged my puppet, then death was the only outcome waiting for her. I immediately controlled Dapang and ordered him to block the bullet with his hammer. Then he hurled the massive weapon directly at Su Making. She never expected a zombie to throw a hammer. She couldn't dodge in time. The hammer struck her head-on, killing her instantly. The rest of the officers who had entered the subdivision were quickly wiped out by my puppets as well. From their corpses, I obtained several guns and plenty of ammunition. But at midnight, something unbelievable happened. Under the glow of the crimson moonlight, Su Making's corpse suddenly came back to life. Her shattered bones and mangled body completely regenerated. In fact, she seemed even stronger than before. Through Dapang's eyes, I witnessed everything. I was completely dumbfounded. What the hell? This woman actually came back from the dead? Even Su, Making herself looked confused as she examined her body. She discovered that all her injuries had vanished, and that her strength and speed had increased dramatically. She eventually concluded that she must be an evolver whose ability allowed her to resurrect after death. The next day, Su Making returned once again, this time bringing even more heavily armed officers with her. My anger immediately flared. Not only had this woman revived after I killed her yesterday, but she actually had the nerve to come back and cause trouble again. This time, I unleashed 3 evolved zombies to surround her. But because her power had doubled after resurrection, the attacks of the 3 zombies were almost meaningless. I then ordered my gun-wielding puppets to open fire. She dodged nearly every bullet, but eventually I found an opening and killed her a second time. This time, I crushed her body into pieces to make absolutely sure she couldn't get back up. Yet when night arrived, she revived again. And just like before, her strength doubled once more. I was speechless. Are you serious? Is this woman using cheat codes? Every time she died, she came back stronger. The situation was giving me a massive headache. And what made it even worse was that there seemed to be another hidden evolver secretly helping Su Making from the shadows. What happened next made me realize that this mysterious ally was just as dangerous as she was. Every time one of my attacks was about to hit Su Making, a mysterious force would stop it for exactly 1 second. It could even bend bullets in midair. The hidden evolver responsible for all of this was none other than Ruzu. She had been secretly observing everything for a long time. After watching carefully, she concluded that there was a zombie king hidden inside the subdivision, secretly controlling all the zombies. Using telepathy, she reached out to Su Making and proposed an alliance. She disguised herself as a mysterious warrior called the Invisible One and suggested that they work together to kill the zombie king. Naturally, Su Making was thrilled. She believed she had finally found a powerful ally who shared her goals, so she happily agreed to cooperate. On the night of the operation, Su Making lured Dapang away from the subdivision gate. She successfully entered the subdivision, but I personally blocked her path in front of Building 5. To protect little Kiki on the 7th floor, I had already surrounded the entire building with zombies. Holding my machete tightly, I attacked with pure fury. Every strike was savage and merciless. There wasn't even a hint of hesitation left in me. Meanwhile, Ruzu was secretly watching from the second floor of Building 1. Using her ability to control time, she repeatedly froze my killing blows at the last second. But she only did it to prevent Su-making from being injured. No matter what happened, she would never allow anyone to hurt me. Su-making became completely confused. Is this invisible one really our ally? Why is she stopping my attacks against this zombie too? In response, Ruzu only sent her a single message. You are not allowed to hurt that zombie. The battle grew even more intense. Su-making desperately tried to force her way into Building 5, but I blocked her with everything I had. I let out a terrifying roar filled with rage. My desire to protect my family was so strong that it felt as though the entire subdivision had turned cold. Then, in that moment, Ruzu finally realized the truth. As Su-making charged toward Building 5, every zombie in the area swarmed forward like madmen. They weren't protecting a zombie king. They were protecting the child on the 7th floor. And the one commanding them to protect her at all costs was none other than her zombie papa. Suddenly, every clue connected together. Papa is the zombie king? She thought in shock. Everything finally made sense. The zombie king she had been trying to eliminate all this time was actually her own father. She almost wanted to slap herself. She had even planned to steal crystal cores and feed them to the zombie king, never realizing she had been helping her own dad all along. The moment she understood everything, she immediately stopped helping Su-making. Without Ruzu's support, Su-making instantly lost her advantage. I immediately unleashed my 3 evolved zombies, and together we beat her mercilessly. She was turned into a living punching bag. As consciousness faded, the last thing she thought was, "Invisible one, you tricked me." After choking her until she lost consciousness, I wrote a message on a piece of paper and threw it at her. It said, "Live peacefully. If you die again, everyone in the police station will be buried with you." Because Su-making was far too kind-hearted, she had no choice but to agree. She simply couldn't bear the thought of innocent people dying because of her. The following days became much calmer. Every day, I sparred with Kidlat to improve my combat skills. I even searched for learning machines and educational flashcards for little Kiki. The girl learned frighteningly fast. Before long, she could already read, write, and do mathematics. I could feel it in my heart. My daughter definitely had the potential to become a great emperor someday. Meanwhile, Ruzu could only pretend to be an ordinary child. She sat in front of the learning machine and babbled like a baby while screaming internally. In her previous life, she had attended a famous university as a graduate student. Now she was being forced to repeat preschool education. It was almost torture. Whenever I left during the day, she secretly sneaked downstairs to chat with Su-making. Surprisingly, the two got along very well. Su-making had absolutely no idea that this cute and innocent-looking child was secretly an ancient empress. She told Ruzu everything about herself. Meanwhile, Ruzu quietly plotted how to recruit the 9-death demon policewoman. After all, Su-making had the potential to reach the emperor realm in the future. If she could earn her trust, she would become a tremendous ally. I noticed that little Kiki genuinely enjoyed talking with Su-making, so I decided not to interfere. Honestly, it was probably good for her to have another human to talk to. Of course, I still made sure Su-making remained tightly chained whenever necessary, and I always had Kidlet number 1 watching her closely. Then one day, one of my zombie puppets brought me new information. Far away on a city street, a tier 2 tyrant zombie had appeared. This was the first time I had ever seen such a creature. Its arms had mutated into massive razor-sharp claws, and both its strength and speed were terrifying. What caught my attention even more was the person being chased by it. The fleeing evolver was none other than Taizo, the powerful man who had once destroyed one of my zombie puppets. The tyrant's wounds healed almost instantly. No matter how many times Taizo struck it, the damage disappeared immediately. In the end, Taizo barely escaped by squeezing into a narrow alleyway where the tyrant couldn't follow. As I watched, I couldn't help thinking, this tyrant is far too strong. If I face it head-on, I'll definitely lose. But then a better idea came to mind. I ordered Kidlat to lure the tyrant toward the police station. Coincidentally, Su-making had just returned from gathering supplies. The moment she saw the tyrant, she immediately stepped forward and drew its attention away from the survivors. She didn't hesitate at all. She was willing to risk her life to protect everyone at the station. Watching everything unfold, I smiled coldly. Go ahead and fight. I'll be the one who benefits in the end. After an intense battle, Su-making realized she couldn't defeat the tyrant through direct combat. She cleverly lured it toward a nearby gas station. Then she fired her weapon at the fuel tanks. Boom! A massive explosion erupted as the entire gas station was engulfed in flames. The tyrant was swallowed by the inferno. But moments later, the monstrous creature staggered out of the burning fire, still alive, struggling through the flames as if it refused to die. What happened next completely exceeded my expectations. After the battle, the tyrant's entire body was burned black, yet it was still alive. Its injuries were horrifying, but it stubbornly refused to die. I immediately ordered Erpong and Kidlat to attack. The tyrant had already become too weak to resist. Erpong swung his iron club, which weighed over a ton, and smashed it down mercilessly. The impact shook the ground itself. Not long afterward, the tyrant finally collapsed and could no longer stand. Kidlat seized the opportunity and continuously slashed its body with his steel sword. At last, we killed the tyrant. When I obtained its Tier 2 crystal core, I was ecstatic. However, this time I didn't rush to swallow it immediately. First, I cooked a meal for Kiki and reinforced all of our defenses. Only after making sure everything was safe did I head to Building 4 and consume the crystal core. The energy inside it surged through my body like a tidal wave. Thanks to that overwhelming power, I successfully advanced to Tier 3. My entire body became dramatically stronger, and my mental power increased several times over. The range of my control expanded from 10,000 meters to dozens of kilometers. I could now command more than 100 ordinary zombie puppets at once. Even Tier 2 evolved zombies had become easy for me to dominate. In terms of speed, I surpassed Kidlat, the agility-type zombie. In terms of raw strength, I could now face tank-type zombies like Dapang head-on. Looking at myself, I finally felt like I had become a true survivor of the apocalypse. Not long after advancing, I subdued another Tier 2 tank zombie. This monster was as large as a small car. I named him Erpong and equipped him with a steel club weighing more than a ton. A single swing from Erpong could crush a vehicle into scrap metal. If he threw the weapon, even reinforced concrete walls would shatter on impact. Ever since Erpong began guarding the entrance of Sunshine Community, even evolved zombies no longer dared to approach. Meanwhile, Ruzu secretly reached Tier 3 as well. Her telekinesis became even more terrifying. She could now launch steel nails at incredible speeds, and when combined with her ability to control time, she could kill enemies silently before they even realized they were under attack. Looking across the entire apocalypse, she was already one of the strongest humans alive. One day, a strange book suddenly appeared near my feet. It was called The Blood Blade Technique. I honestly thought some mysterious master had left it for me. Excited, I immediately began studying it. What I didn't know was that Ruzu had secretly written the technique herself in a notebook and tossed it where I would find it. The blood blade technique used blood as a medium to strengthen killing intent and blade aura. Once mastered, a sharp weapon would no longer be necessary. My own aura would become the deadliest blade in the world. My progress was astonishing. As I trained, my combat ability improved rapidly. Unfortunately, our peaceful days didn't last long. One night, a group of 5 evolvers arrived. They came from a survivor base to gather supplies near Sunshine Community. After discovering that all nearby resources had mysteriously disappeared, they followed my zombies carrying supplies and eventually found our subdivision. Under the cover of darkness, they climbed over the walls and tried to sneak inside. What they didn't realize was that the moment their feet touched the ground, I had already noticed them. My zombie army immediately surrounded them. Kidlat number 2 moved first and instantly killed one of the intruders. At the same time, Dapang's massive hammers sent 2 more enemies flying through the air. In the middle of the chaos, I personally entered the battle. Using the Bloodblade technique I had mastered, I unleashed a sweeping slash that cut directly through the final enemy attempting to escape. Afterward, we found identification cards from a survivor base on their bodies. Looking at the evidence, I finally realized something. Humanity was growing stronger, much faster than I had expected. It was only a matter of time before Sunshine Community was completely exposed. Because of that, I made a decision. We would move. Our destination would be Changeway Farm on the outskirts of the city. The land there was vast, with plenty of space for cultivation. It was far away from human settlements, surrounded by zombies I could recruit into my forces. Most importantly, it would provide a better environment for Kiki. I couldn't let her spend her entire childhood trapped inside a concrete building. She deserved sunlight, fresh air, and real food. Honestly, every time I thought about her diet, I wanted to cry. For so long, she had been eating the same things every day: milk, fried rice, and porridge. Not a single fresh vegetable in sight. Once we reached the farm, I could order zombies to till the soil and grow crops. Then Kiki would finally be able to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. But before leaving, there was still one issue I had to resolve: Su making. Her resurrection ability was far too troublesome. I couldn't permanently kill her, yet I didn't want to keep dragging her around either. Since we were leaving anyway, I thought it might be best to simply set her free and part ways forever. When I told Kiki about my decision, she nodded obediently before asking, "Papa, do you think Big Sister will come with us?" I already knew the answer. Su-making would never abandon the people at the police station. Following us was impossible. However, while I wasn't paying attention, Ruzu secretly slipped Su-making a small piece of paper. Written on it were 2 words: Changeway Farm. Before leaving, Su-making looked at Ruzu and asked, "Do you still remember what we talked about?" Ruzu smiled and replied, "If the day ever comes when you realize this world isn't as beautiful as you think it is, and if you become sick of protecting people who don't deserve it, remember that you can always protect me instead." After that, Su-making awkwardly returned to the police station. Unfortunately, what awaited her there shattered her heart completely. The people she had risked her life to protect had become monsters. They were eating human flesh. They had murdered every police officer who refused to join them. They even killed Su-making herself. This was the 3rd time she had died. After resurrecting once more, her power increased again. This time, she personally slaughtered every cannibal in the station. Not a single one survived. The last young man fell to his knees and begged, "Officer Sue, you're a good person. I just wanted to survive." Sue Making turned away and began walking off. Then she heard the sound of a gun being cocked behind her. In an instant, she moved like lightning. One punch shattered the man's ribs. Looking at him, she asked bitterly, "Why? Why did you have to betray me too?" As she stared at the corpses scattered around the station, something inside her finally died. She remembered Ruzu's words. What if those people never deserved your protection in the first place? Looking around, she realized the answer. People like these, are they really worth protecting? She glanced at the small piece of paper in her hand, Changeway Farm. Then she took one final look at the police station she once thought she would serve for the rest of her life. Without another word, she turned around and disappeared into the darkness. "Little Kiki," she whispered, "I'm coming to find you." On the day of our departure, 5 massive trucks rolled out of Sunshine Community in a long convoy. Every vehicle was driven by zombies. Behind them marched hundreds of armed zombie puppets under my control. The sight was so unbelievable that survivors along the road nearly dropped their jaws. One evolver searching a store for supplies happened to witness the convoy passing by. Looking at the terrifying zombie faces sitting behind the steering wheels, he rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "Am I going crazy?" he muttered. "Since when can zombies drive trucks?" As our convoy continued down the highway, the roar of the engines echoed through the wasteland. One after another, evolved zombies were attracted by the noise and began emerging from every direction. But instead of fear, I felt excitement. Because from this moment forward, every zombie that came toward us would either become another crystal core or another soldier in my growing army. I didn't hesitate for even a second. Using my telekinesis, I immediately took control of every zombie drawn to the noise of our convoy and added them to my army. Instead of losing soldiers, my forces continued growing larger and larger as we traveled. As we passed near Shanghai City Zoo, something enormous suddenly blocked the road ahead. A gigantic golden Tier 2 mutant python was coiled across the highway. The monster was over 20 meters long, and its scales shimmered like pure gold under the fading sunlight. Before anyone could react, it swallowed 2 of my scouting zombies whole. My eyes narrowed. I immediately sent Erpang to the front with his massive iron club. With a single devastating strike to the head, the giant serpent was instantly stunned. At the same time, Dapang and the other tank-type zombies rushed to both sides, cutting off every possible escape route. My agile zombies charged forward and relentlessly hacked at the python's body with steel swords. In the middle of the battle, Tyrant Number 1 suddenly leaped down from a nearby building and drove its razor-sharp claws directly into the snake's heart, tearing open a massive wound. Erpang followed immediately, smashing the creature's skull apart with his iron club before extracting its Tier 2 crystal core. I handed the crystal core to Erpang without hesitation. Lower tier crystal cores no longer benefited me, but they were still extremely useful for strengthening my subordinates. In war, quality was always more important than quantity. My goal was no longer to build a huge army. I wanted an elite force made entirely of high-tier evolved zombies. Nearby, Ruzu stared at the enormous snake corpse with sparkling eyes that looked ready to shine like stars. "Papa, I want to eat snake," she said eagerly. Honestly, I couldn't blame her. The poor kid had been surviving on milk, fried rice, and porridge for so long that even I felt sorry for her. Seeing such a massive snake naturally made her curious, but I wasn't sure whether mutant beast meat was safe for humans to eat. So I decided to store the corpse for now. I planned to find someone else to test it first before letting Kiki try any. "I'll cook it for you once Papa confirms it's safe to eat, okay?" I told her gently. Although Ruzu looked a little disappointed, she understood my caution. What she didn't tell me was that she already knew mutant beast meat was not only edible, but also extremely beneficial for strengthening the body. Unfortunately, there was no time for explanations. Our convoy continued moving forward. The towering city buildings gradually disappeared behind us, replaced by quiet countryside and endless fields. I checked the map and realized we were less than 10 minutes away from Changeway Farm. The blood-red sunset painted the entire sky crimson. I quietly watched the scenery passing outside the truck window before glancing at Kiki sitting beside me. She leaned against the glass silently, staring outside with wide eyes. Since being reborn, this was the first time she had ever left Sunshine Community and truly seen the outside world. Maybe in her eyes, the sunset looked beautiful. Reaching out, I gently pinched her soft cheek. She looked up and gave me the sweetest smile imaginable. "Papa, the world outside is really big," she said. I nodded and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. The world is very big and very dangerous. But no matter what kind of world this becomes, as long as you're beside me, everything has meaning." In the distance, a vast stretch of farmland slowly appeared beneath the setting sun. That was our new home, Changeway Farm. Meanwhile, nearly 10 kilometers behind us, deep within the ruins of Shanghai City, a lone figure wrapped in a terrifying aura was rapidly following our tire tracks. The kindness and warmth had completely disappeared from Sue Making's eyes, replaced by cold determination. Yet whenever she remembered the little girl who always smiled at her while holding a drawing board, she couldn't stop herself from smiling secretly. After arriving at Changeway Farm, I followed the map through a narrow forest path. Eventually, the farm's signboard appeared in front of us. Wooden fences and barbed wire surrounded the property, and warning signs about high voltage hung everywhere. I could also see evidence that parts of the fence had been forcibly destroyed. Sitting inside the truck, I carefully observed the area. The farm was incredibly quiet. It would be difficult for enemies to discover us here. More importantly, it was much larger than Sunshine Community, easily spacious enough for Kiki, myself, and my entire zombie army. Most importantly, the fresh air here felt far less suffocating. It was the perfect place for Kiki to grow up. "Papa, are we here?" Ruzu asked while stretching lazily. I nodded and immediately sent a group of zombie subordinates through the damaged fence to investigate. The moment they entered, I frowned. The entire farm was stained with dried black blood. I directed my zombies toward the vegetable fields only to discover that the gardens had been completely destroyed. Massive footprints covered the soil. It was obvious that some mutant beast had been living here. Just then, distant sounds of fighting and beastly roars echoed from deeper inside the farm. I immediately ordered my zombies to follow the noise. What we found near the livestock pens left me speechless. Standing there was an enormous mutant cow. But this wasn't an ordinary cow. It had developed gigantic fangs even more terrifying than those of lions or tigers, and it was actively devouring the corpse of another animal. Ever since the apocalypse began, even cows had become meat eaters. The moment the mutant cow noticed my zombies, it charged straight toward us without hesitation. This monster had already reached level 2. Ordinary zombies stood no chance against it. I immediately sent Erpang and Tyrant Number 1 into battle. Erpang slammed his iron club into the cow's head, causing the beast to stagger in a daze. Tyrant Number 1 seized the opportunity and slashed deep into its body with its razor-sharp claws, opening a huge wound. Unfortunately, the cow's hide had evolved into something incredibly durable. Thankfully, the beast wasn't smart enough to dodge. After several brutal attacks, it finally collapsed. Tyrant Number 1 drove its claws into the creature's skull and extracted an almost orange-colored level 2 crystal core. After killing the giant cow, I continued searching the farm. Then, near the fish pond on the western side of the property, I noticed something strange. A massive trail carved into the mud, as if some enormous creature had dragged its body across the shoreline. The moment I saw it, a bad feeling crept into my chest. Something even more dangerous might still be hiding somewhere inside Changeway Farm. When I sent one of my zombie servants closer to the water, a gigantic turtle suddenly burst out from beneath the surface. With a single bite, it tore off the zombie's ankle as if it were nothing. The creature was enormous, and its shell was unbelievably tough. When the zombie servant punched it, the impact was so strong that the zombie's fist shattered instantly while the turtle remained completely unharmed. I had no intention of killing it yet. Instead, I left 2 zombie servants guarding the shoreline. That was more than enough to keep the turtle from crawling out. Besides, turtles were famous for their long lifespans. Once I confirmed that mutant beast meat was completely safe for humans, I planned to save this giant turtle as nutritious food for Kiki. I thoroughly searched the entire farm twice. Only after making absolutely sure it was safe did I begin a massive cleanup operation. When the farmhouse finally looked brand new again, I brought Kiki inside. She looked around curiously, her eyes filled with excitement and anticipation. "So, this is going to be Papa's and my new home? It looks really nice." After we settled in, security became my first priority. Erpang stood guard at the southern gate with his gigantic iron club. Lightning Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 each led their own groups of zombie servants to patrol the other 3 directions. Meanwhile, Dapang and Tyrant Number 1 secretly watched over Kiki from a distance. I transformed the entire farm into an iron fortress, a place that would be nearly impossible for anyone to infiltrate. As I watched Kiki sleeping peacefully that night, an overwhelming sense of accomplishment filled my heart. Sleep well, little Kiki. From now on, Clearwater Farm is our home. The next morning before Kiki woke up, I had already prepared breakfast. I even placed a large tray of fresh fruit on the table. There were still plenty of fruit trees growing in the woods north of the farm. The moment Kiki saw them, her eyes sparkled brightly. Even the fragrance alone was enough to make her excited. After breakfast, she stepped outside and immediately noticed groups of armed zombies patrolling the farm in an organized formation. Deep down, she couldn't help admiring me. My methods of controlling zombies were so precise that even ordinary zombie kings would struggle to match them. Hugging my arm, she asked if she could take a walk around the farm. I couldn't refuse. I gently guided her toward the fields. Kiki was shocked when she saw zombies planting crops under my command. Back when I was still human, I had grown up in the countryside. I used to work in the fields with my grandparents, so I knew quite a bit about farming. I was confident I could restore the ruined farmland. Meanwhile, I fed the 2 level 2 mutant beast crystal cores to Erpang. The results were immediate. He successfully advanced to level 3. His body expanded dramatically, swelling until he was nearly the size of a truck. Dark scales began growing all over him, covering his skin like a layer of living armor. Even bullets would have trouble penetrating it. To test his defense, I struck him with my blade, but it left only a tiny scratch on his scales. At that moment, Erpang officially became the main battle tank of my zombie army. With a level 3 general guarding the farm gate, I finally felt much more secure. Around the same time, I discovered a new way to strengthen my forces. High-level evolved zombies were rare, so instead of waiting to find stronger ones, I decided to personally feed crystal cores to my zombie servants and help them evolve. But while I was busy with all of this, Kiki had her own secret plans. During those days, she quietly slipped away to the fish pond and secretly fed the old mutant turtle. For 3 consecutive days, she gave it pieces of meat from the giant mutant python. Hidden inside the meat were drops of her own blood. On the 3rd day, she finally activated an ancient beast taming technique that she had obtained from a mysterious place in her previous life. Using that technique, she formed a contract with the giant turtle. From that moment on, she could give it simple commands, and the two of them were even able to communicate through their minds. She also taught the old turtle a cultivation method that would allow it to grow stronger over time. Deep inside her heart, she had already made up her mind. One day, she would nurture this turtle until it became as powerful as the legendary black tortoise she remembered from her previous life. I had absolutely no idea any of this was happening behind my back. I simply assumed Kiki had grown attached to the old mutant turtle and wanted it as a pet, so I let her do whatever she wanted. After that, I decided to build something special for her. I spent days gathering rides from abandoned amusement parks around the city and built a small amusement park right inside the farm. Since there was no electricity anymore, I ordered my zombies to operate everything manually. They pushed the carousel, turned the rides, and worked like tireless employees. When Kiki saw what I had prepared, she was stunned. In truth, as the former Empress who had ruled over countless lives, she had no real interest in childish attractions like these. But she knew everything came from my heart. So she climbed onto the carousel and pretended to enjoy it. What she never expected was that the lonely orphan girl she had been in her previous life had never once experienced a carefree childhood. As she rode the carousel and laughed while I chased her around, something deep inside her finally awakened. For the first time, she was genuinely enjoying being a child. If you ignored the zombies manually pushing the rides, it would have looked like the happiest scene in the entire apocalypse. Meanwhile, as Lightning Number 1 repeatedly drove trucks back and forth transporting amusement rides, an evolved human named Limo was secretly watching. His ability allowed him to become completely invisible. Curious, he followed Lightning's truck all the way back to Changeway Farm. The moment he saw what was happening inside, his entire understanding of the world collapsed. There were countless zombies living peacefully alongside a little human girl. Immediately, greed consumed him. He assumed Kiki was the one controlling all the zombies. If he kidnapped her, then the zombie army would belong to him. That night, while invisible, he quietly slipped into Kiki's room. His knife was already descending toward her throat when everything suddenly stopped. Before he could react, Kiki froze time itself. She jumped off the bed and slapped him so hard that he flew across the room. Then she used a mysterious spell from her previous life and planted a blood-red mark deep inside his mind, completely controlling his life and death. Looking down at him, she coldly asked, "Do you want to die or live?" Without the slightest hesitation, Limo surrendered. After placing the blood mark on him, she ordered him to infiltrate the survivor base in Shanghai City as her spy. From now on, he would regularly return and provide intelligence. Of course, I knew nothing about any of this. All I saw every day was Kiki happily playing around the farm. Several days passed as I continued hunting evolved zombies throughout Jiangnan City to collect crystal cores. Then one day, to my annoyance, I ran into Sue making again. Damn it, why is this woman here too? I wondered. Apparently, after everything that happened at the police station, she had followed our trail all the way to Changeway Farm just to find Kiki. The journey had nearly driven her insane. She was constantly attacked by a vengeful mutant creature that traveled underground and nearly killed her multiple times. When I found her, I knocked her unconscious and chained her beside the slide in Kiki's amusement park. But this time, something about Sue making had completely changed. After being betrayed by the survivors, she had sacrificed everything to protect. She had lost all hope in humanity. Now the only person she wanted to protect was Kiki. Naturally, Kiki took advantage of this opportunity and slowly won her over. She brought Sue making food every day and talked to her whenever she could. Because of that, Sue making finally experienced a life with enough food and clean water for the first time since the apocalypse began. A comfortable life where she didn't need to constantly fear death. Even she had to admit that living with the Zombie King was far more comfortable than living with humans. At the same time, I continued strengthening my forces. I hunted evolved zombies across Jiangnan City and fed crystal cores to my subordinates. Before long, I had more than 30 Tier 2 zombie servants under my command. One night, after hunting mutant beasts in Hanglong Mountain, I obtained several Tier 3 crystal cores. Combined with the endless harvest from the zombie-run farms, I finally gathered enough resources to break through. I swallowed 4 Tier 3 crystal cores at once. The energy exploded inside my body and pushed me into Tier 4. My mental power increased dramatically, and my control range expanded to 50 kilometers. Even my physical body underwent a complete transformation. Other than my dark crimson eyes, I looked almost identical to a living human. After advancing, I immediately upgraded 4 of my strongest corpse puppets to Tier 4 as well. Meanwhile, Ruzu secretly reached Tier 4 too. Her telekinesis became terrifyingly powerful. She could now fly for long periods and had learned how to use various elemental magic spells. Using her powers, she controlled bees and turned them into spies that monitored everything happening both inside and outside the farm. What I didn't realize was that she had secretly strengthened my defenses as well. Around the farm were bloodthirsty mutant vines I had transplanted from Wanglong Mountain. These vines could devour the blood and flesh of any living creature, but had no effect on zombies. Originally, I planted them several kilometers away as a defensive barrier. However, after Ruzu enhanced them with blood magic, they became a deadly trap fully under her control. But while our strength continued growing, danger was approaching. At the Shanghai survivor base, officials had detected unusual zombie activity. For the first time, they issued a warning about the possible existence of a zombie king. The mysterious incident involving Wang Xing's group in Jiangnan had already attracted their attention. To investigate, they assembled a special scouting team that included invisible evolvers like Limo. Their mission was to find evidence of the zombie king. The moment Ruzu sensed Limo approaching the farm, she flew out into the night to intercept him. When she met him, she calmly gave a single order. Go back and report that you found nothing. There is no zombie king here. Under the influence of the blood mark, Limo immediately obeyed without question. I still had no idea that a storm was quietly gathering around us. After Limo returned to the survivor base, Ruzu didn't stop there. She secretly eliminated their stubborn captain and used her mind control techniques on the remaining 3 scout members. Everything seemed to be going according to her plan. Unfortunately, Wang Xing's instincts were far sharper than anyone expected. The moment he noticed something strange about the scouts' behavior, he set a trap and personally interrogated them. As soon as the hidden curse inside their minds was triggered, all 4 scouts died instantly. Wang Xing's expression darkened. Not only was he shocked, but he became even more convinced that a zombie king was hiding somewhere in Jiangnan City. When news of the incident reached the higher-ups, the supreme commander of the Shanghai survivor base was furious. Without hesitation, he dispatched 3 elite teams to Jiangnan to capture the mysterious zombie king. Through the mental connection she had left behind, Ruzu immediately sensed that Limo and the others were dead. She knew our enemies had discovered something. The storm was coming, yet she remained completely calm. With the strength she and I possessed now, as long as humanity didn't send overwhelming military forces and relied only on mutant soldiers and evolvers, they had no chance of defeating us. She devoted every spare moment to training. Once she reached Tier 5, she was confident that even tanks, artillery, and entire armies would be unable to stop her. Meanwhile, I remained completely unaware of all this. I continued hunting monsters throughout Huanglong Mountain, collecting energy crystals to strengthen my zombie army. Before long, the 3 elite teams arrived outside Jiangnan City. Wang Xing served as the overall commander, accompanied by 2 other captains, Lefang and Zhang Hai. Among their team was an evolver codenamed Falcon, whose ability allowed him to see through the eyes of his mutant eagle. It didn't take long before Falcon discovered something shocking. "My God, is this real?" he muttered in disbelief. Through the eagle's eyes, he saw an evolved zombie driving a truck through the city. The zombie was transporting monster flesh and blood to feed a large zombie horde. Wang Xing immediately gave an order. "Don't lose sight of that truck. Let's see where it goes." Completely unaware that I was being watched, I finished feeding my zombie forces through one of my puppets and began driving back toward Changeway Farm. High above the truck, Falcon's giant eagle followed silently like a shadow. Eventually, it tracked us all the way to the farm. Looking through the eagle's vision, Falcon finally saw the entirety of our stronghold. His face immediately turned pale. "We've found it," he whispered. "That zombie drove straight into a farm outside the city." He continued observing carefully. "The defenses are unbelievable. Outside the walls, there's a massive field of blood-red vines. At the main gate stands a giant zombie the size of a 2-story building." Wang Xing and the others swallowed nervously. They finally realized the truth. The farm was the nest of the zombie king. Zhang Hai stared at the giant figure guarding the gate and said, "That monster has to be a tank-type zombie above Tier 3. Falcon nodded grimly. "And that's not all. I saw several other evolved zombies patrolling inside. Their presence is incredibly powerful. There are at least 4 or 5 Tier 3 zombies inside the farm." However, Falcon hadn't seen everything. The eagle couldn't fly too low without risking detection. "There are still areas we haven't observed," he admitted. Lefang frowned and asked, "What do we do now? Attack immediately?" Wang Xing immediately shook his head. "No, the situation is unclear. Charging in blindly would be suicide. We send the information back to the base first and let headquarters decide. Also, those blood-red vines don't look normal. They're probably mutated plants used as defenses by the zombie king." Lafang then remembered the mysterious little girl they had been investigating. What about the human child? If the zombie king's nest is inside that farm, then she's probably there too. Wang Xing remained serious. Right now, the biggest threat isn't the girl. It's the zombie king himself. If we alert him, none of us will leave this place alive. After discussing their options, the three commanders decided not to act. They transmitted all information about the farm's location and defenses back to Shanghai Survivor Base and waited for further orders. The report quickly reached the Supreme Commander. Once again, the atmosphere inside the command center became heavy with tension. An officer stood and reported, "Commander, Wang Xing's team has confirmed the location. The farm's defenses are extremely strong. Several evolved zombies above Tier 3 are guarding the area. There are also unknown mutated plants surrounding the perimeter." The Supreme Commander frowned deeply. "How many Tier 3 evolvers do we currently have available at the base?" The answer came quickly. "Less than 10, sir. And they're already scattered across different sectors. Gathering them all together would be difficult." The entire meeting room fell silent. Everyone understood the same terrifying fact. If the intelligence report was accurate, then for the first time since the apocalypse began, humanity might be facing a zombie king powerful enough to challenge an entire survivor base. Everyone at the Shanghai Survivor Base understood the same terrifying reality. With their current strength, launching an assault on a fortress guarded by multiple Tier 3 zombies would be suicide. Their chances of victory were practically zero. In the end, the Supreme Commander made the final decision. "We cannot solve this through brute force. Tighten surveillance immediately, learn the zombie king's habits, and determine the full extent of his strength. At the same time, send a report to the Imperial capital and request reinforcements. Accelerate the training of our high-tier evolvers. Until backup arrives, no one is allowed to do anything that might alert them." What they didn't know was that Erpong, the giant monster standing guard at the farm gate, had already advanced to Tier 4. And if they counted my real body, Changeway Farm actually possessed 6 Tier 4 fighters. Meanwhile, they were still evaluating my strength using Tier 3 standards. Inside Changeway Farm, I finally finished an entire day of hunting. When I returned home, I prepared a delicious dinner for Kiki. She was incredibly happy while eating. A grain of rice clung to the corner of her lips as she smiled at me. Nearby, Su Making quietly ate the food Kiki had brought her while secretly glancing in my direction. The more she looked at me, the more confused she became. Why did the Zombie King's appearance keep changing? If someone didn't stare closely, they would think I was an ordinary human. A crazy theory suddenly formed in her mind. Could the Zombie King eventually evolve into a real human? That night, Kiki secretly approached Su Making. Looking directly at her, she asked, "If people tried to hurt Papa, whose side would you choose?" Su Making fell silent. For a long time, she couldn't answer. Kiki didn't press her. Before leaving, she simply said, "Forget it. There's no point asking anyway." Then she walked away. Su Making sat down heavily on the bed and stared after her. Her emotions became a tangled mess. In the end, humans and the Zombie King were destined to be enemies. Yet when she remembered everything that had happened at the police station and compared it to life here at the farm, her thoughts became complicated. Every day, Kiki brought her food and talked to her. Although the Zombie King kept her chained up like a pet, he had never truly harmed her. Suddenly, she laughed bitterly at herself. Lying back on the bed, she stared at the slide hanging above her. That entire night, she couldn't sleep. Meanwhile, several kilometers away on a high ridge, Wang Xing's black mutant eagle continued circling above Changeway Farm. Suddenly, Falcon opened his eyes. "Captain Wang, a truck just left the farm. It's heading toward Huanglong Mountain again." Wang Xing calmly nodded. "Keep watching, record everything. The departure times, routes, and return schedules. I want every detail. And find a way to see the deepest parts of the farm. Most importantly, locate where the Zombie King is hiding." High above the clouds, the Black Eagle silently observed everything happening below. Inside the farm, Ruzu sat on a swing, gently swaying in the wind. Her white dress fluttered softly, and her rosy cheeks carried an innocent smile. "Little Kiki, looks like your troubles are finally over," Su Making said while leaning against the slide and watching her. "You finally came outside again." Ruzu nodded. In her mind, even if Shanghai Base sent more people, they would only be walking to their deaths. "Then does that mean you'll come outside every day now?" Su Making asked hopefully. She had been bored out of her mind sitting alone in the amusement park all day. "Of course," Ruzu replied seriously. After all, she wanted to completely win over the future 9-death demon Empress. Building a strong relationship now would be extremely valuable later. Suddenly, Su Making spoke with unusual seriousness. "I'll help you and your papa." Ruzu froze for a moment. This was the answer to the question she had asked several days ago. She never expected it. After all, Su Making had always been fiercely loyal to the government and valued protecting survivors more than her own life. "Why?" Ruzu asked. Su Making's answer came immediately. "Because I promised I would protect you." Deep inside, she still believed the Zombie King retained a human conscience. He had never harmed innocent people. More importantly, little Kiki existed as his greatest weakness. As long as Kiki remained safe, there was no reason for the Zombie King to attack anyone. But if humans ever hurt Kiki, no one could predict the disaster that would follow when the Zombie King lost control. At that same moment, the Black Eagle continued following one of my trucks until it left Jiangnan City. Eventually, it returned to the skies above Changeway Farm. Through the eagle's eyes, Falcon could clearly see everything below. But then he noticed something that completely shocked him. A little girl was happily playing on a swing. Beside her stood a human woman leaning against a slide and talking with her. Falcon immediately reported back, "Captains, I've found the mysterious little girl. There's another woman with her." The three captains exchanged serious looks. Wang Xing spoke first. "Is it possible that the little girl herself is the Zombie King?" Meanwhile, Ruzu suddenly felt an uncomfortable sensation, as if unseen eyes were secretly watching her. Quietly, she expanded her telekinetic perception like invisible waves spreading through the air. Within moments, she discovered the source. A black eagle was circling high above the farm. She instantly knew it wasn't a wild mutant beast. It was someone's pet. An evolver was using it to spy on them. The moment she realized this, her expression slowly turned cold. The enemy had finally found them. The moment Ruzu saw the black eagle circling in the sky, she immediately understood what was happening. Zhonghai Survivor Base must have sent people again, she thought. Without the slightest hesitation, she launched a mental attack. Her telekinetic power condensed into an invisible blade and stabbed directly into the black eagle's mind. The bird instantly lost its balance for a moment. However, its owner merely assumed it was exhausted and quickly recalled it. Meanwhile, Ruzu secretly smiled. She immediately took control of a nearby sparrow and ordered it to follow the eagle. The tiny bird silently tailed it through the skies. Eventually, it led her straight to three groups of evolvers hiding inside a drainage canal outside the city. Through the sparrow's eyes and ears, Ruzu overheard their entire plan for a nighttime raid. What amused her most was that these people genuinely believed that her father was some kind of zombie king. The moment Ruzu regained her focus, she hurried over to me and pointed toward the sky. Looking at me seriously, she said, "Papa, I saw a flying person earlier." A flying person? Had the human evolvers finally discovered my farm? After confirming the details with Kiki, I became certain. Our location had already been exposed. The sudden appearance of these evolvers made my mood instantly darken. Without wasting any time, I recalled my entire zombie army. I summoned 4 Tier 4 zombies and stationed them around the farm to protect Kiki. Even Su Making noticed that something was wrong. She looked toward Ruzu and asked, "Kiki, what's happening?" Ruzu casually replied, "Who else could it be? Just some human evolvers looking for trouble." Su Making immediately said, "Kiki, can you tell your papa to release me? I want to help too." Ruzu only smiled and shook her head. "We don't need your help for now. Papa can handle this himself." When night finally arrived, I sat silently in the living room with my eyes closed. Through the vision of countless zombies, I monitored every corner of the farm. Deep within a forest nearly 20 kilometers away, 3 groups of evolvers finally appeared. Standing at the front, Wang Lei spoke in a serious tone. "The target is ahead. Everyone stay alert." None of them noticed the tiny bee perched on a nearby branch, silently watching everything. Through that bee's eyes, Ruzu observed them with complete disdain. A bunch of people searching for their own deaths, she thought. As the 3 groups approached the wall of blood-thorn vines surrounding the farm, they bent down and prepared to cut through the vines. At that exact moment, the vines came alive. Countless thorn-covered tendrils violently pierced through their bodies. Like starving beasts, they crazily devoured blood, flesh, and life itself. "Shit! These vines are a trap!" Wang Lei shouted. But it was already too late. Before anyone could react, 5 people had already been completely consumed by the blood-thorn wall. In the chaos that followed, many more were pierced and seriously wounded. Through the eyes of my zombies, I finally got a clear look at the intruders. I sneered coldly. Well, you people really want to die that badly? Fine, I'll grant your wish." I immediately took control of the Tier 4 zombies guarding the farm. The first to charge into battle were Tyrant Number 1 and Erpang. The moment an evolver rushed forward, Erpang's giant club came crashing down. The unfortunate victim's rock shield shattered instantly, along with nearly every bone in his body. At the same time, Flame Number 1 raised both hands toward the sky. More than 10 massive fireballs suddenly appeared overhead. A second later, they rained down like meteors and exploded directly in the center of the enemy formation. 4 slower evolvers were immediately swallowed by the raging inferno. The remaining 6 survivors were blasted away, their bodies burned black and covered in severe injuries. The raid that they had confidently planned had transformed into a complete nightmare in less than a minute. And from the very beginning, None of them had realized that they were already trapped inside the hunting ground of the zombie king they came to eliminate. Earth Shield Number 1 reacted immediately and raised a massive wall of earth, protecting the remaining survivors from the barrage. Then the walls began closing inward from all directions, turning the battlefield into a giant death trap. Several evolvers desperately tried to climb over the towering barriers, but Flame Number 1 had already anticipated that. Fireballs exploded above them one after another, blasting them off the walls before they could escape. Amidst the chaos, Captain Lee seized an opportunity and leaped over the barrier, believing he had finally gotten away. Unfortunately for him, Tyrant Number 1 was already waiting on the other side. I watched through my zombie's eyes as Tyrant Number 1 slammed his fist into the ground. The impact was devastating. Captain Lee is probably dead, I thought coldly. However, what I didn't realize was that one evolver had secretly escaped. He possessed the ability to create clones and had left behind a corpse to fool everyone. The moment Ruzu saw one of the bodies lying among the dead, her brows immediately furrowed. She instantly understood what had happened. That guy escaped using his cloning ability, she thought. Still, she wasn't too worried. Thankfully, none of them had discovered my true strength. In fact, they had only mistaken me for a zombie king. That misunderstanding would become a very useful surprise when we met them again in the future. That night, Sue-making tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Then a sudden thought entered her mind. What if I could stop the humans from attacking the zombie king? Maybe humans and zombies could finally coexist peacefully. Meanwhile, Chen Yun returned to the survivor base carrying news about the 3 assault teams. The report was horrifying. Every single member of the expedition had been wiped out. According to Chen Yun, the Zombie King commanded Tier 4 mutant zombies, and there were also terrifying blood vines that hunted humans. His voice trembled as he told the story. The news spread throughout the base like wildfire. Upon hearing it, the head commander immediately ordered a request for reinforcements from the imperial capital. On our side, Ruzu eventually convinced me to remove Sue-making's chains. After being freed, Sue-making requested a private conversation with me. The moment she entered the living room, she looked straight at me and said, "Zombie King? You're still human inside, aren't you?" My eyes instantly turned cold. This was the greatest secret I possessed. I picked up a piece of paper and wrote, "I won't kill you. Go on." Taking a deep breath, Sue-making continued. "Kiki is still human. You don't really want her to spend her entire life living among zombies, do you?" Her words left me speechless. Then she added, "What if one day I become the leader of humanity? If that day comes, would you be willing to live peacefully alongside us?" Both Ruzu and I were shocked by her proposal. However, I didn't reject her immediately. Instead, I wrote another response. "We'll discuss that when you actually become humanity's leader." The next day, Ruzu decided to reveal part of her power to reassure me that freeing Sue-making hadn't been a mistake. Standing inside the room, she stretched out her tiny arms and said, "Papa, I think I might have gotten a superpower." The next moment, her small body slowly floated into the air. I nearly jumped with excitement. Kiki was an evolver too. From that day onward, I began training her seriously. I gave her nails to practice attacking targets with telekinesis, and even provided steel needles that she could secretly use as hidden weapons. Watching her abilities improve every day filled me with pride. My little Kiki wasn't just a genius anymore. She had become something far more terrifying. As her control over her powers grew stronger and stronger, I gradually realized a simple truth. Among all the zombies, mutant creatures, evolvers, and powerful allies surrounding me, the strongest trump card I possessed was not Dapong, not Kidlat, and not even my zombie army. It was Kiki herself. Meanwhile, the long-awaited response from the imperial capital finally reached Zhanghai City. They dispatched the Sky Squadron to assist in eliminating me. Every member of the unit was a Tier 3 flying evolver. 5 combat helicopters rapidly approached our territory and mercilessly bombarded my farm with explosives. Watching my farm get torn apart filled me with rage. But what shocked the attackers was that my Tier 4 zombies showed absolutely no fear. Flame Number 1 and Flame Number 2 transformed into gigantic pillars of fire. Together, they created a massive net of flames that covered the sky itself, trapping the Sky Squadron inside the battlefield. At the same time, Thunder Number 1 unleashed deadly lightning spheres and scorching beams of energy. Tyrant Number 1 joined the assault with his razor-sharp steel claws. Together, they slaughtered the flying evolvers one after another as they desperately tried to escape. On the other side, Ruzu secretly joined the battle. Using her power over time, she repeatedly froze critical moments and rained poisoned needles onto enemies attempting to approach the house. Meanwhile, Sue-making literally risked her life to protect Kiki. During the battle, a blade pierced her stomach and she collapsed onto the ground. But moments later, she resurrected once again and immediately threw herself back into the fight. By the end of the battle, all 3 elite squads had been completely wiped out, along with the entire Sky Squadron. Only Chen Yun, who possessed the ability to create clones, managed to escape once again. Looking at the devastation around us, I knew the farm was finished. This place had already been exposed. There was no point rebuilding it. I wrote down my decision on a piece of paper. From now on, wherever Kiki goes, that place will become our home. After reading it, Su Making chose to stay with us and continue traveling together. Once our convoy left the ruined farm behind, we headed south. When we arrived in Beacon City, I immediately launched a zombie war to harvest evolved zombies and gather crystal cores. At the same time, I crushed the local Longhuang syndicate that controlled the area. Their second-in-command, Jiang Qing, managed to escape alongside a flying evolver and eventually reported everything to the Beacon survivor base. After exterminating all the evolved zombies throughout Beacon City, our convoy continued its journey. By the time I advanced to Tier 5, my mental power experienced another explosive increase. My control range expanded to 50 kilometers, and I could simultaneously command a massive number of Tier 4 zombie puppets. Even more importantly, 3 Tier 5 puppets had now entered my service. However, things became completely different when we reached Shanchuan City. Everywhere I looked, terrifying monsters roamed the streets. I led my puppet army deep into the city and began hunting the mutated beasts. The results were incredible. We collected an enormous number of crystal cores. Later, I wiped out the Beast King cult hiding within Kangyu Mountain. After destroying them, I looted their caves and obtained mountains of supplies, food, and vegetables. Before the cult's guardian died, he revealed one final piece of information. Their leader had left to hunt a Tier 5 monster. The moment I heard those words, my instincts immediately warned me of danger. I became far more cautious. Sure enough, before long, the cult leader personally came searching for us. His name was Huang Xuan. Before the apocalypse, he had been nothing more than a debt collector who bullied others for a living. But after awakening his unique ability to control monsters, everything changed. Now he commanded countless mutated beasts and possessed enough power to dominate entire regions. As reports of my growing zombie army spread across the wastelands, Huang Xuan became convinced that only one of us could rule this new world. And when he finally began tracking our convoy, I knew that one of the most dangerous battles since the apocalypse began was about to unfold. Meanwhile, Huang Xuan's hatred toward the wealthy ran deeper than anyone could imagine. His older sister had taken her own life after suffering endless abuse at the hands of powerful rich people. Because of that, he wanted to seize the power of Thunderlord and use it to destroy Shanchuan-based city completely. Looking at Su Making, he proposed, "We only have one enemy. Let's join forces." But Su Making rejected him without hesitation. "Sorry, but I have no interest in that." Humiliated by her refusal, Huang Xuan secretly made his move that very night. He sent a mutated pangolin underground to assassinate Kiki from below. Unfortunately for him, the creature never even got close. With a single attack, Ruzu killed the mutated beast instantly. The display terrified Huang Xuan so much that he fled immediately and exposed our location to Zhanghai City in hopes of borrowing someone else's hand to eliminate us. During our time in Shanchuan City, Ruzu successfully advanced to Tier 5. Her control over telekinesis had reached an astonishing level. She could now create solid psychic needles powerful enough to pierce through walls. Even more terrifying was her mastery over time itself. She had unlocked one of its deepest secrets and could rapidly accelerate the aging of any target she chose. As for Su Making, her endless training and constant battles finally pushed her to Tier 4 as well. Around this time, I jokingly announced, "From now on, Anti-Su Making will be known as the Black Ball Knight." Her face immediately darkened. "No, absolutely not. I refuse," she protested furiously, making everyone laugh. While we were growing stronger, the Imperial capital finally made its move. They dispatched their strongest trump card, the legendary Tenglong Squad. This was the same elite team that had successfully killed a zombie king before. Their greatest weapon was a shapeshifter named Zhou Bing, a man capable of perfectly copying the appearance of any creature. His specialty was infiltration. Their plan was simple. Just like before, part of the squad would attract attention outside while Zhou Bing disguised himself as a zombie, infiltrated the enemy camp, located the zombie king, and killed him in a single strike. However, before any of that could happen, Ruzu finally decided to tell me the truth. One evening, she walked up to me with a serious expression and said, "Papa, there's something I need to tell you. I can control time." As proof, she activated her power. In an instant, a potted plant withered and dried up, while a piece of snake meat hardened into something resembling stone. I was completely stunned. Yet before I could even process it, she revealed an even bigger secret. "Papa, I'm actually a Tier 5 evolver now." I froze where I stood. My brain stopped working for several seconds. But in the end, I didn't ask any questions. None of it mattered. She was my daughter. That was enough for me. Then she raised her tiny fist and smiled brightly. "Papa, from now on, I'll be the one protecting you." I gently rubbed her hair, and a warmth I couldn't describe filled my chest. I had never felt so proud. Not long afterward, our convoy arrived in Lidong City. As usual, I sent my zombie puppets out to harvest crystal cores from evolved zombies. But the Lidong survivor base reacted incredibly quickly. They mobilized their entire military force and launched a full-scale assault on Hangai community. At first, Flame Number 1 was completely safe. His body of pure fire made him nearly immune to ordinary attacks. However, I never expected the enemy to deploy wave after wave of self-propelled artillery. Even Flame Number 1 was pushed to the brink of destruction. The moment Ruzu saw this happen, her eyes turned ice cold. Rage exploded from her tiny body. "Nobody is allowed to hurt my papa," she declared. Then she unleashed her full power. Time control, telekinesis. The battlefield itself seemed to freeze. Every shell and projectile fired toward us suddenly reversed direction. Under Ruzu's control, the entire barrage flew back toward its original source. Massive explosions erupted across the enemy lines. Within moments, the entire heavy artillery regiment was annihilated by its own weapons. Panic instantly spread through the surviving soldiers. They turned and fled in every direction, but my zombie puppets chased them down relentlessly. In the end, only a single evolver managed to escape, carrying the wounded commander away using a teleportation ability. The battle ended in complete disaster for Lidong-based city. Nearly every attacking force was wiped out. Watching Ruzu's terrifying display of power left me speechless. My heart swelled with pride. With a single attack, she had shattered an entire human army. Even my strongest Tier 5 zombie puppets would stand no chance against her. Far away from the battlefield, a helicopter carrying the Tenglong squad was already flying toward Shanchuan City. Inside the aircraft, Job Bing calmly wiped down his sword. The shapeshifter wore a confident smile. Looking toward his captain, he said, "Captain, don't worry. I guarantee this mission will be a success." He had no idea what kind of monster awaited him. After the battle in Lidong ended, I returned to the living room and sat down on the sofa. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself a moment of peace. But deep inside, I could feel it. The real storm was approaching. The imperial capital had finally sent its strongest hunters, and the next battle would determine far more than just our survival. It would decide the fate of everyone traveling beside me. I used the vision of one of my zombie puppets to scan the surrounding area. After everything I saw, I already knew the answer. Before I could say anything, Ruzu walked over to me. Her expression was unusually serious. "Papa, we can't stay here anymore." I nodded immediately. I've been thinking the same thing. We may have won that battle, but the price was too high. Our location has been completely exposed. A moment later, Su Making approached from the window. Dust from the battlefield still covered her face. Looking at me, she said, "Lin Moyan, we need to leave now. Lidong-based city's response speed is terrifying. If they send another wave of reinforcements, we might end up completely surrounded." There was no argument from me. 30 minutes later, our convoy was already speeding down the main highway leading south from Lidong City. I deliberately chose a route that moved farther and farther away from their survivor base. Through the aerial surveillance of Flame Number 1, I continuously monitored the remaining forces of Lidong-based city. Fortunately, none of them appeared to be preparing to pursue us yet. For 2 straight hours, our convoy raced across the roads. Finally, we crossed the border of Lidong City and left its territory behind. Sitting in the back seat, Ruzu pressed her tiny face against the window and stared at the scenery passing by outside. Then she turned toward me and asked, "Papa, where are we going now?" I unfolded a map and slowly examined the entire southern region of Jiang Province. My finger eventually stopped on a distant city. Linan City, I thought. That was our next destination. And if we continued even farther south beyond that, we would eventually leave Jiang Province altogether. Looking at the map, I fell silent for a moment. The further we traveled, the more dangerous the world became. New cities meant new enemies, new evolvers, new monsters, and unknown dangers waiting around every corner. But at the same time, it also meant more opportunities, more crystal cores, and more chances to grow stronger. As long as Kiki was with me, I wasn't afraid of moving forward. No matter where we ended up, that place would become our home. I glanced at Ruzu, whose bright eyes were still filled with curiosity about the road ahead. Then I looked at Su Making and the others riding alongside us. For the first time since leaving the farm, I felt that we were no longer just survivors wandering through the apocalypse. We had become something bigger. A family traveling together through a world that wanted all of us dead. Su Muqing thought about it for a moment and finally nodded without arguing. Our convoy continued moving south, and along the way I casually harvested another batch of zombie crystal cores. By evening, we stopped beside an abandoned gas station and set up camp. A campfire crackled in the darkness while Su Muqing placed an extra piece of roasted rib onto Kiki's plate before taking a huge gulp of beer herself. Looking at Kiki, she grinned and asked, "Little Kiki, do you think your dad was a chef before the apocalypse?" Kiki smiled and shrugged. Maybe. She happily accepted the roasted rib while I sat near the truck studying the map. From our current location, the border of Jiang Province was still about 200 kilometers away. But there was one major problem. Linan City stood directly in our path. The city stretched across the entire north-south route. Going around it was nearly impossible. We would have no choice but to pass straight through it. And if a city that large existed, then a survivor base almost certainly existed there as well. I frowned. If Lijiang-based city had already spread information about us, then Linan-based city was probably preparing for us at this very moment. Crossing the city might turn into another brutal battle. Kiki seemed to notice my concern. She ran over, climbed onto the truck, and leaned beside me to look at the map. Papa is worried about Linan City, right? I nodded. Kiki immediately puffed out her tiny chest and said confidently, "Don't worry, I'm here." Then she clenched her little fist with a serious expression. Seeing that tiny face trying so hard to act reliable, I couldn't help laughing. I reached out and pinched her soft cheek. But just as I was enjoying that brief moment of peace, flying number 1 suddenly transmitted something through my vision. Far across the northern horizon, several tiny black dots were rapidly approaching through the sky. My expression instantly turned cold. Those weren't helicopters from Lijiang Base City. Without hesitation, I wrote a message and tossed it towards Su Muqing. "Zhao Lin, take little Kiki into the truck." Su Muqing didn't ask any questions. She immediately picked up Yun Roshue and ran toward the vehicle. Kiki narrowed her eyes as she looked into the distance. 3 helicopters. They're not from Lijiang. Su Muqing's face changed as well. The helicopters hovered several kilometers away for a while before eventually disappearing beyond our line of sight. But I didn't relax. Using flying number 1, I secretly followed them from a distance. Through the puppet's vision, I watched 7 heavily armed soldiers disembark from the helicopters. Leading them was a crew-cut man, radiating the aura of a Tier 4 evolver. The 7 men immediately established a campsite after landing. Just from the way they constantly checked maps and documents, I could tell these people were on a mission. This was no coincidence. These people are dangerous, I thought. Either they're elite soldiers from a major survivor base, or they were sent directly by the Imperial capital. The moment I thought about the Imperial capital, my heart tightened. I had completely wiped out their Sky Squadron at Clearwater Farm. If these newcomers really came from the capital, then they might be the Empire's second trump card. I decided not to act rashly. I ordered flying number 1 to continue monitoring them while I shut down the convoy and concealed everything within the darkness. After setting up camp, the 7 soldiers repeatedly studied maps and reports. The more I watched, the more certain I became. They weren't here by accident. They were looking for me. Yun Roshue hadn't gone to sleep either. She sat cross-legged in the back seat, quietly cultivating. The moment she sensed the change in my emotions, she opened her eyes and looked at me. "Papa," she asked softly, did something happen?" I quickly wrote on a piece of paper, "A 7-man squad has arrived from the north. Their equipment is top tier. I suspect they're from the Imperial capital, and they might be here for us." After reading it, Yun Roshue frowned slightly. If they're the Imperial capital's ace squad, there will probably be people with special abilities among them. The Sky Squadron we fought before was made entirely of flying-type evolvers. This time, they might be even more troublesome. That was exactly what worried me the most. Then, through flying number 1's vision, I noticed something unusual. One of the young men from the 7-person team suddenly left their camp and walked alone into a nearby forest. The moment he entered the woods, the aura around his body changed. His human presence vanished and was replaced by the unmistakable aura of a zombie. Instantly, I understood their strategy. This man could disguise himself as a zombie. If I hadn't discovered him beforehand, he might have successfully infiltrated my zombie forces and gotten close enough to launch a surprise attack. The previous zombie king was probably killed using the exact same method. "Kiki, we've got another problem," I thought as I showed Yun Roshue what I had discovered. After reading the information, her expression turned extremely serious. Disguising himself as a zombie? The innocent look disappeared from her face, replaced by a sharp and calculating gaze. That ability is definitely troublesome. If his disguise is perfect enough, even your mental power might not be able to distinguish him from a real zombie. Then she calmly pointed at herself. "But I can." Her voice was filled with confidence. "Time control allows me to sense the flow of time inside every living thing. Humans and zombies have different time signatures. Zombies have already stopped aging, but humans can't hide their natural flow of time no matter how well they disguise themselves. As long as I focus carefully, I'll be able to find him." Hearing that eased my worries a little, but I still refused to underestimate our enemy. I immediately changed our plans and wrote, "We're not going through Linan City anymore. We'll leave the province through the mountain roads instead." At that moment, Su Muqing finally woke up and leaned over to read the note. "A detour? That'll add several extra days to the trip," I shrugged. "Better a few extra days than getting ambushed." Seeing the seriousness on our faces, Su Muqing decided not to ask any more questions. Before dawn arrived, I deliberately led the convoy onto a remote mountain route. The road was extremely difficult to travel, but it offered excellent concealment. Unfortunately, I had underestimated the enemy's tracking ability. About 3 hours after we started moving, flying number 1 reported that the 7-man squad had broken camp and begun heading south. Even worse, their direction ran almost parallel to our own route. They were tracking us. Looking through flying number 1's eyes, I soon spotted a mutant bird circling high above our convoy, always staying upwind. Killing it would have been easy, but it would also alert our enemies and force them to abandon their current plan. After thinking it through, I made a decision. If they wanted to use a disguised infiltrator to assassinate me, me, then I would simply use their own strategy against them. I explained the plan to Yun Ruoshui and Su Muqin. Kiki immediately understood. Papa, you want to deliberately expose a weakness, lure the infiltrator into our camp, and wipe them all out in one move? Su Muqin looked much less confident. That's risky. What if the infiltrator's ability is even stronger than we think? Kiki patted her tiny chest proudly and said, "As long as I'm here, he won't get away." Su Muqin looked at her, remembering how Kiki had reversed an entire artillery barrage just a day ago. After that, she silently stopped arguing. Following our plan, we set up camp in an open river valley at dusk. I intentionally deployed only a small number of zombie puppets around the campsite while hiding all of the high-tier puppets deep within the surrounding forest. From the outside, the camp appeared poorly defended and full of weaknesses. After night fell, I sat beside the campfire pretending to relax. In reality, my mental power was fully expanded across the entire area. Yun Ruoshui lay inside her tent as if she were sleeping, but her time control ability remained active the entire time. Su Muqin, on the other hand, was genuinely asleep. Around midnight, my mental power finally detected movement at the edge of the camp. A lone zombie was slowly approaching. At first glance, it looked no different from any other zombie, but its path was far too deliberate. Instead of wandering aimlessly, it carefully avoided the patrol routes of my zombie puppets and moved directly through the gaps in our defenses toward the center of the camp. I didn't alert anyone. Instead, I continued pretending not to notice. The zombie moved closer and closer until it finally reached the edge of the campsite. Its eyes scanned the area around the campfire before locking directly onto me. Then it pulled out a short blade and charged. The moment the disguised assassin reached within 5 meters of me, time itself suddenly stopped. The infiltrator froze completely in place. Yun Ruoshui calmly stepped out of her tent, her small face cold and emotionless. Looking directly at the frozen attacker, she said, "Just as I thought, you're human." "Calm down," Yun Ruoshui said as she stared at the frozen infiltrator. "Zombies don't have a flow of time inside their bodies. His heart is still beating." I stood up and slowly walked toward the disguised assassin, carefully examining him. His camouflage was almost flawless. From his appearance to his aura, there were practically no flaws at all. If it weren't for Yun Ruoshui's time control ability, I honestly might not have discovered him until it was too late. The next second, I released my mental power and sent a command to all of my hidden Tier 5 zombie puppets waiting in the surrounding mountains. Several kilometers away, inside the temporary camp of the 7-man squad, they instantly sensed an overwhelming killing intent descending upon them. "Not good! Zhao Bing has been exposed," shouted the crew cut leader, Qin Heng. His face changed dramatically as he jumped to his feet and roared, "Everyone, battle stations!" But they were already too late. Flame number 1 struck first. His blood flame fire spirit arrived like a blazing meteor. In less than 10 seconds, all 3 helicopters exploded into enormous fireballs. Their escape route was gone. One evolver turned pale with fear. Before he could react, Undead number 1 attacked. A crimson light enveloped an evolver who was in the middle of activating his ability. Suddenly, the man lost control of his own body and was dragged helplessly toward Undead number 1. A moment later, a blood-colored spirit serpent pierced straight through his chest. At the same time, Flying number 1 descended from the sky and activated its flying domain. Under the influence of the spherical domain, the long-range attacks launched by 2 evolvers instantly slowed down. Their power dropped to nearly 0, but Flying number 1's steel claws were completely unaffected. Meanwhile, Qin Heng revealed his own ability. His skin transformed into silver metal armor that covered his entire body, giving him incredible defensive power. Erpang swung his giant club downward with overwhelming force. The first strike dented the armor, but failed to break it. Then came the second strike. The metal armor shattered completely. Qin Heng spat out a mouthful of blood and was blasted backward. Before he could even hit the ground, Undead number 1's blood serpent had already caught up to him. Qin Heng died instantly. Watching through my puppet's vision, I confirmed that none of the 7-man squad survived. Only then did I finally breathe a sigh of relief. Afterward, I returned my attention to the campsite and looked at the infiltrator who was still frozen in place by time itself. What should we do with him? At that moment, Su Muqin finally woke up because of all the commotion. She came out wearing a jacket and nearly jumped in shock when she saw the scene. Yun Ruoshui answered calmly, "Kill him." She casually waved her hand, and a psychic needle shot forward and pierced directly through the infiltrator's forehead. The moment time control was released, his body collapsed to the ground. His disguise vanished, revealing his true human appearance. Su Muqin crouched down beside the corpse and searched through the hidden pocket inside his chest armor. A moment later, she pulled out an identification card. Tenglong Squad. The name itself didn't affect me much, but Yun Ruoshui's reaction surprised me. She stared at the identification card for a long time before speaking. The Imperial capital has now lost 2 ace squads in a row. Her eyes became unusually serious. Next time, they won't send another special squad. I looked at her and asked silently, "Then what will they send?" She raised her head and replied in a low voice, "An army." The atmosphere instantly became heavy. Yun Roshue continued. Once the Imperial capital confirms that 2 of their elite squads have been completely wiped out, they'll classify Papa as a maximum level threat. When that happens, the scale of the hunt will increase dramatically. She paused briefly before continuing. The destruction of 2 ace squads won't make them fear the Zombie King. It will only convince them that the Zombie King is even more dangerous than they originally thought. They won't give up. Her gaze turned cold. They'll simply escalate. Looking directly at me, she finished with absolute certainty. That's why we have to leave this province as quickly as possible. I quickly wrote on a piece of paper, "We leave tonight, no more stopping." Without wasting a second, I ordered the convoy to move under the cover of darkness. At the same time, I kept flying number 1, continuously scouting from high above to make sure no enemies were following us. As we approached the outskirts of Linan City, I made a bold decision. Instead of taking a detour, I would drive straight through the city. Going around it would cost us at least 5 extra days, and in the apocalypse, every additional day spent in the wilderness meant 5 more days of danger. Although Linan had its own survivor base, the city itself was massive. As long as we stayed far away from the base and crossed the city quickly, the chances of being discovered were relatively low. Before entering, I released my mental power and brought every zombie along the route under my control, forcing them to clear a path for the convoy. Under the darkness of the night, our vehicles moved silently through the empty streets without making a single sound. Everything went smoothly. We had already passed most of Linan City, and the southern exit was right in front of us. Then Flying Number 1 suddenly sent back urgent information. On the elevated highway leading out of the city, a military convoy had formed a blockade. Armored vehicles and military trucks were parked across the bridge, completely sealing the road. Snipers had also been deployed on nearby buildings overlooking the bridge. They were soldiers from Linan-based city, but after observing them carefully, I noticed something strange. They didn't look like troops preparing for battle. It seemed more likely that after hearing reports about a zombie king appearing nearby, Linan base had simply established checkpoints at major entrances and exits. Yun Roshue looked at me seriously and said, "Dad, we can't go through here. Even if we fight our way through, the battle will be huge. The city is too big. We'll end up attracting the entire base city." I immediately agreed. "We'll go around," I wrote. The convoy turned sharply into a remote alleyway and began moving west. According to my map, we could pass through the industrial district on the western side of Linan and escape through the ring road. Unfortunately, the industrial district was a complete mess. Collapsed factories and abandoned vehicles blocked almost every route. 20 minutes later, we finally managed to break through and reach the ring road. Just when I thought we were about to escape successfully, the sound of helicopter rotors suddenly echoed from behind us. 3 armed helicopters emerged from the direction of the city. Their searchlights swept across the darkness as they searched the ground below. My heart immediately sank. Speed up, I thought. The convoy accelerated instantly. The helicopters reacted just as quickly and began chasing us. Moments later, their searchlights locked onto our vehicles. Then the machine guns opened fire. Bullets slammed into the highway behind the convoy, sending sparks flying everywhere. A loud broadcast came from above. "Convoy ahead! Stop immediately for inspection, or we will open fire." I completely ignored the warning. Instead, Flame Number 1 shot out of the convoy like a crimson meteor and charged directly toward the helicopter formation. A massive explosion erupted in the night sky. Flames illuminated the darkness as burning wreckage rained down from above. The searchlights went dark one after another. The pursuit was broken. Taking advantage of the chaos, our convoy pushed forward at full speed, crossed the city border, and vanished into the endless night. "We made it out," Sumuching said as she let out a long sigh of relief. But I couldn't relax yet. Linan-based city would definitely report the direction of our convoy to higher authorities. Every second from this point onward mattered. We drove non-stop through the night. At dawn, we finally saw the border marker between Jiang province and the neighboring province. But the moment our convoy crossed the provincial border, Flying Number 1 transmitted an image that instantly froze the smile on my face. On a mountain overlooking the southern side of the border stood Huang Xuan. He was staring down at our convoy from a distance. He wasn't attacking. He was simply watching, quietly observing and tracking us. Yun Roshue noticed him as well, and a cold look flashed across her face. "That man is dangerous," she said. "He won't give up. Should we eliminate him first?" I shook my head. Although we had already killed his mutated pangolin, Huang Xuan himself was a beast to mare. There was no telling what other hidden cards he still possessed. More importantly, this wasn't the right time to deal with him. I wrote another note. "We've already left Jiang province. Everything else can be planned later. Keep moving." The convoy continued forward and entered the neighboring province. Once we left Jiang province behind, the roads immediately improved. The highways were wide and open. Although there were still abandoned vehicles scattered around, they were nowhere near as dangerous as the mountain roads we had traveled before. 3 days later, we finally arrived at Yunzhou City. Before the apocalypse, Yunzhou had been a massive metropolis with a population of over 3 million people. Now it belonged entirely to the zombies. But to me, it looked like an enormous treasure vault. 3 million people meant countless zombies. Countless zombies meant countless evolved zombies and endless crystal cores waiting to be harvested. More importantly, Yunzhou was far away from Jiang province. Information traveled slowly between provinces, which meant I didn't have to worry about human survivor bases hunting me down anytime. After our convoy entered Yunzhou City, I followed my usual routine and unleashed my zombie army to sweep through the surrounding streets, harvesting crystal core after crystal core. While I was busy strengthening my forces, Yun Roxue made full use of every minute to cultivate and train. At the same time, she continued raising her old turtle. After days of steady growth, the old turtle finally broke through to Tier 4. Its body had become so massive that you could practically place a table on its shell and play cards there. Sumu Qing wasn't wasting time either. Every day, she rode her disguised black bull, Dahe, out into the wilderness to hunt mutated beasts. Her strength improved steadily with each battle. At the same time, she continued practicing the 9 UN severing veins bow technique that Yun Roxue had taught her, causing her aura to become increasingly deep and intimidating. As for me, I used this peaceful period to expand my corpse puppet army even further. By harvesting endless crystal cores throughout Yunzhou City, I successfully cultivated several more Tier 4 corpse puppets. With strength like this, I honestly felt confident that I could face a medium-sized survivor base head-on if necessary. But the truth was, I never wanted war. All I wanted was a safe place where little Kiki could grow up peacefully. Unfortunately, peace never lasted long in the apocalypse. On the 5th night of our stay in Yunzhou, Flying Number 1 suddenly sent back alarming information from high above. In the northwest region of the city, an enormous convoy was moving toward us. There were dozens of military vehicles, armored transports, and tanks. 6 armed helicopters escorted the formation from the sky, while several command vehicles marked with special insignias occupied the center of the convoy. Their destination was clearly Yunzhou City. The moment I saw it, my heart sank. The news had finally reached this place as well. It seemed the imperial capital had expanded the Zombie King bounty notice into the neighboring province. This force was most likely an extermination army assembled by the local survivor bases after receiving the warning. Of course, there was also the possibility that Huang Xuan had leaked my location to them. Either way, the result was the same. I could no longer stay here. Sumu Qing had already grown accustomed to our wandering lifestyle. Without saying a word, she silently began packing our supplies. Yun Roxue walked over to the window and stared quietly at the empty streets outside. After a long silence, she looked at me and said, "Dad, we can't keep running forever." I knew she was right. But what other choice did we have right now besides running? Still, deep down, I believed there would come a day when we would never have to run again. Yun Roxue turned around and smiled at me. It was a smile far too mature and steady for someone her age, filled with confidence and determination. Before dawn arrived, our convoy once again disappeared into the darkness of the night, leaving Yunzhou City behind. Meanwhile, dozens of kilometers away, that massive military force continued advancing toward the city. Inside one of the command vehicles, a stern-looking middle-aged man sat silently reading a classified document. A bright red, top-secret stamp covered the front page. The title contained only 5 words: Zombie King Elimination Plan. The man slowly closed the file and looked toward the distant darkness where Yunzhou City lay hidden. A cold smile appeared on his face as he murmured, "This time you won't escape."